Chapter 822, A Joker Everywhere. Chapter 822, A Joker Everywhere. Ling Han waited at the doors. So many years had already passed anyways, so he would not mind waiting just this while longer. Meanwhile, Hunyeo was kicking stones out of boredom. Pa, pa, pa. She seemed to have gotten a little addicted, and her kicks gradually became stronger. Finally, she had gotten into trouble. Aya, who is it that dares to ambush me? A young man walked out, one hand holding his forehead. He was baring his teeth in pain, his features completely twisted from the pain. The moment Hunyeo spotted him, she immediately stuck out her tongue and hid behind Ling Han. Then she stretched out a hand to point at Zhu Xian and said, "It's that woman who threw stones at you." Hunyeo saw very clearly. Who would suspect a child? That young man followed Hunyeo's hand and turned to look at Zhu Xian. He was just about to fly into a rage, but a dazed expression immediately appeared on his face. This woman was a bit too beautiful, wasn't she? Her beauty was practically in the top of the whole cold city, and no other would be able to match her. All of a sudden, it seemed as if his forehead did not ache anymore. He hurriedly put on a smile that he personally thought was his most suave expression, and said, "I am Feng Yixio. May I know your beautiful name, miss?" Zhu Xian merely gave him an indifferent gaze, and said, "We are only strangers coming together by chance, absolute strangers, so there is no need to exchange names." "How unique, I like it," Feng Yixio mumbled, his face turning to the side. Then, he turned his head back round, his smile even brighter than before. Being able to meet in a sea of people, how could this not be a kind of destiny? "Miss, your beauty is much too brilliant, my eyes can only see you." Zhu Xian directly ignored him so that he would not make use of his advantageous position and continue to be a pest. "Miss, your beauty is a poison, but I will endure the suffering gladly. You have conquered me, please allow me to use my remaining life to love and pamper you." Feng Yixio blurted one romantic line after another. He was definitely a veteran of the love scene. He didn't even repeat a single line. From his handsome appearance along with his sweet mouth, there were definitely innumerable women who would willingly jump into his gentle and soft trap. Unfortunately, this did not have the slightest effect on Zhu Xian. On the other hand, her expression became colder and colder. "You're reading on novelful, thanks. Idiot, why are you spouting so much nonsense? Just knock her unconscious and carry her home." Hunyeo really could not bear looking anymore, and jumped out to offer him ideas. "That wouldn't be proper, right?" Feng Yixio rubbed his head as he smiled foolishly. "Believe Hunyeo declared, cheering him on. Feng Yixio clapped his hands once, and exclaimed, "I'll do it." Ling Han laughed in spite of himself, and asked, "What do you want to do?" Feng Yixio instantly shivered, and exclaimed, "I have no interest in men, so don't speak dirty lines to me." Fuck, this guy was a joker, right? Ling Han laughed coldly, and said, "Since you've said so, then I will really have to play around with you." Don't you mess around, I am not that kind of person. Moreover, I am very powerful, so don't seek your own suffering." Feng Yixio quickly drew out his sword. "You are a pervert, don't come near me" was written all over his guarded expression. Ling Han extended a hand to grab the other man very casually. "Damn pervert, take this." Feng Yixio's sword shot out, and a sword ray swept past, slicing towards Ling Han's wrist. He really couldn't tell. Although this young man was unreliable for some reason, he was still quite skilled. There were not that many people that could form sword ray at this young age. However, compared with Ling Han, the two of them were on two completely different levels. Ling Han's hand changed course, and grabbed the other man's wrist. He laughed, and asked, "Just guess, will I be steaming or roasting you?" "Mother." Feng Yixio's whole body was covered with goosebumps. He hurriedly exerted force, wanting to break free. However, Ling Han's hand was like an iron cuff, and he could not even move a bit, and could only stare at him helplessly. "Don't call mother, call me big brother, and I'll let you go." Ling Han smiled. "You think you deserve to be called big brother by me?" Feng Yixio humphed. His left hand shook, and there actually appeared another sword, which quickly stabbed out at Ling Han. Ling Han loosened his grip, then once again grabbed out at Feng Yixio's left hand. He had grabbed it accurately. Feng Yixio was completely astonished. How could this man move so quickly? He released an angry roar, and his right hand slashed out again. He used his full power in this strike. Even his hair was sticking up like needles. His sword intent solidified, and ruthlessly shot out at Ling Han. Ling Han's physique was extremely tough, so his soul surely was not sturdy as well. With this strike from him, Ling Han would definitely grab his head and grunt in agony. There should be no such monster in this world that could cultivate both physique and soul to the ultimate peak. Ling Han smiled faintly. His sword heart moved, and Feng Yixio's sword intent collapsed immediately. He seemed to have suffered a great injury, and his whole face paled instantly. Even his expression was twisted, which made him look as if he was in incredible pain. Ling Han released his grip. Feng Yixio, meanwhile, was curled up on the ground. His whole body was twitching. This barrage to the soul was not a light attack. However, to him, this might possibly be a kind of grinding stone. If he could survive it, the toughness of his soul would definitely improve further. Young Master Feng. At this moment, two people walked out the doors. One was the guard that had gone in previously to make the announcement, and the other was a tall, slender old man. He looked to be in his 60s or 70s, and had a kind of bearing to him. However, at this moment, his whole expression was anxious. He shot out quickly right next to Feng Yixio, and helped him back to his feet. Upon closer examination, when he discovered that there was no injury on the latter's body, he finally calmed back down. The old man looked at Ling Han, his gaze chilly, and asked, "Are you the one who injured young Master Feng?" Ling Han laughed. The word injured is not really used accurately. The correct term is sparred with, and he was just not my match. You came to our Cold Spear Association and still dare to cause injury. How dare you, the old man declared coldly. His right hand stretched out, and instantly turned green in color, exuding a metallic texture, with multiple patterns flickering on it. This old man was in the deity transformation tier, so his abilities were really not that low. Ling Han placed his hands behind his back, and said, "I see that your status should not be very low, and I shall ask you this question. Have you heard of the names Jiang Yu Feng, Yun Yong Wang, Tang Xiu Yuan? There is no use even if you reveal a big background. Today, no one would be able to save you." The old man leaped out and delivered a strike at Ling Han. Peng, when his palm had yet to reach its target, the gale created by it had already smacked down. Origin power was compressed, so the destructive ability was very astonishing. Ling Han's right hand pressed out, and the old man was instantly sent flying. Peng, 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 peng. He forcefully burst through at least 10 walls before finally stopping, losing consciousness directly. This time, he should have really attracted enough attention, right? Teng, 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 a great many people raced out of the residence, surrounding Ling Han tightly, but none of them made a further move. A terrifying aura spread out, and a figure walked out. "Greetings, Seventh Elder." Everyone went down on one knee to pay their respects. He was a white-haired old man, but his spirit was hale and hearty, his eyes bright. He stared at Ling Han, and said, "Young man, you have admirable courage, actually daring to come to the Cold Spear Association and behave atrociously." Behave atrociously? Ling Han shook his head. It was only self-defense. However, my patience is limited. If no one is willing to have a calm, peaceful discussion with me later, then I can only choose to turn this place of yours upside down so that you can all calm down. Chapter 823, Founder of the Cold Spear Association. Chapter 823, Founder of the Cold Spear Association. What big boasts, you are merely in the deity transformation tier. Seventh Elder sneered. Young man, the stiffest tree is most easily cracked. You are too proud, so allow me to teach you how to properly behave. Ling Han retorted, your boasts are quite big as well. Don't become a frog at the bottom of a well and think that the world is only so big. You have to understand one thing. In the wider world, there will always be someone better than you. Ha 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 ha. Seventh Elder laughed scornfully in his anger. If the two of them switched their ages, then these words would be quite logical, but now, a young man was actually lecturing him, an old man, which rendered him practically speechless. His eyes froze over, He could not bother to continue the conversation with Ling Han. Otherwise, he would really die from fury. He directly stretched out a hand to grab Ling Han. He was in the heaven tier, so what could be easier than dealing with a junior in the deity transformation tier? Could it be that he had to purposely rise up into the skies for a fight? The other party would not be able to fight back at all. His only fate would be to be subdued in a single move from him, so it was naturally impossible to cause any collateral damage. His right hand grabbed out. The martial intent of the heaven tier surged, forming a terrifying pressure. Those deity transformation tier cultivators who were weaker might even directly be forced onto the ground under this tremendous pressure. Ling Han neither dodged nor avoided. In the eyes of the others, this was very ordinary. An ultimate elite of the heaven tier moved, so what chance would this brat have to dodge? With the pressure from the former's martial intent, he would only be qualified to wait to be captured, naturally. Just when this hand was about to grab him, Ling Han moved. He moved very quickly, and gave a flick to the old man's palm. All of a sudden, the seventh elder's expression changed. Though Ling Han's abilities were not as strong as his martial intent was extremely frightening. It seemed to be capable of penetrating directly into his body like a needle, stabbing him and causing him great pain. He took 7 steps back. When he raised his hand for a look, he realized his fingers were shaking so much that he couldn't even close them tightly into a fist. That was too terrifying. Was this young man a monster? A casual strike from him almost disintegrated his battle prowess. Why did 7th Elder stop? I don't know. I just saw 7th Elder charge over then retreat. Could it be that he managed to block 7th Elder's attack? Are you kidding me? What cultivation level is 7th Elder at? He's practically standing in the ranks of the strongest of this world. How could it be that he couldn't even deal with a youngster? The spectators discussed spiritedly. With their eyes, they naturally could not see clearly what had happened just now. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "How about it? Can we now sit down for a proper talk?" 7th Elder looked at Ling Han, and only after a long while said, "You are underestimating the Cold Spear Association too much. I can't stop you, but that does not mean that there's no one capable of stopping you." What? When they heard these words, everyone was stunned. How could they believe it? The 7th Elder was actually unable to stop this young man. This guy looked to be about 20 years old at most, so how could he be that powerful? Could it be that he was some old monster that had preserved his youthful looks? Ling Han smiled. "I can't bother to stay here and wait for you all to take turns in coming out." Once he said this, he began heading towards the residence. "Stop!" everyone shouted loudly. How could outsiders be qualified to enter into the Cold Spear Association? This was blasphemy. You all would not be able to stop him. Let him in, there will naturally be someone there to teach him proper behavior, 7th Elder said. Everyone nodded. The Cold Spear Association had no shortage of elites. Even if Heaven Tier cultivators could not stop Ling Han, how could it be that even Shattering Void Tier would not be able to as well? In a short while, banging sounds were heard from within. A fight should have happened inside, but it only continued for a while before silence returned. Another short while later, an old man ran out, his face bruised. "What, even 5th Elder has been defeated?" everyone exclaimed in shock. This young man was a little too strong. The 7th Elder hurriedly asked about his battle progress. How many moves had that Ling Han used to defeat old 5th? The 5th Elder's face was completely flushed. He paused for a while before finally saying, "I was beaten by a little girl who is about 10 years old." He actually wanted to add a few years to Hu Nyo's age so that his defeat would look slightly better. However, she was really too small, so he really couldn't add that many years. Pu. Everyone choked. This was the 5th Elder here, and ability-wise, he was even stronger than the 7th Elder. But he had not only lost, he had lost to the little girl that they had seen just now. Who had not seen Hu Nyo? Still, who could have imagined that such a little snip of a girl was actually an elite as well? Peng. Sounds of battle were again heard from within. Similarly, not too long later, 2 old men ran out. Both of them were injured, and one of them had even had his face scratched. 3rd Elder. 2nd Elder. Everyone was astonished. Even these two elders had been defeated. They were known for the strongest battle prowess below the shattering void tier. But even that level of power could not match the intruders. Could it be that Ling Han and his group had battle prowess on the level of the shattering void tier? But when they asked, the two elders had been defeated respectively by Ling Han and Hu Niu, and there was not a bit of exaggeration about it. Hearing their answers, the whole area was silenced. Ha 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 ha, I heard that someone barged into your false cold spear association. At this moment, over a dozen people walked over. The people in the lead were 3 old men, and behind them were 11 young people. If Ling Han was here, he would definitely be able to recognize that one of the young women was precisely Mu Fei Yao. Obviously, these people were from the Southern Spear Association. What nonsense! You all are the false Cold Spear Association, those belonging to the Northern Spear Association yelled. Which one was the real Cold Spear Association? This was a question of principle that surpassed all other matters, and was even more serious than the issue of Ling Han's intrusion into the residence. Rubbish, you members of the false Cold Spear Association are completely shameless. The Northern Spear Association's side began retorting as well. Every time the two sides met up, they would be arguing over this issue for at least half a day. In the past, they had even gotten into a melee over the matter, and almost caused both sides to be destroyed. Thus, the two sides established an agreement. This cold city was their sacred land, and they definitely would not fight here. Because of Cold City's special status, the two Cold Spear Associations had even agreed that they would cooperate together in an effort to eliminate whomever dared to damage Cold City. Looks like you've come into some trouble. Do you want us to give you a hand? A member of the Southern Spear Association asked. We can settle it ourselves, and do not need the help of members of the false Cold Spear Association like you. The members of the Northern Spear Association were naturally unwilling to accept assistance. Otherwise, wouldn't they be admitting to being inferior to the other party? They had that kind of confidence as well because First Elder was an elite of the Shattering Void tier, the top elite of the Northern Spear Association. In the deepest parts of the residence, Ling Han was sitting cross-legged, facing an old man. In front of both of them, there was a cup of fragrant tea. Zhu Xian and Hu Niu, meanwhile, were seated behind Ling Han. Zhu Xian was still fine, maintaining the cultured and refined appearance and behavior of a well-bred young mistress. Hu Niu, however, could not sit down properly. She simply sprawled out on the floorboards, and supporting her little head, began spacing out. That old man was naturally the top elite of the Northern Spear Association, the First Elder. This First Elder was very mild-tempered, and did not immediately start fighting. Instead, he invited Ling Han to sit down for a cup of tea, and said, "Young friend, you are only 20 years old, yet has already reached this height. This talent is indeed very rarely seen, even in all of history. First Elder, thank you for the praise. I wanted to ask First Elder about some matter, and I hope First Elder can tell me," Ling Han said very politely. Respect went both ways. "What matter do you want to know about, young friend?" First Elder questioned. The founder of the Cold Spear Association. Chapter 824, Change of Name. Chapter 824, Change of Name. The founder of the Cold Spear Association? The First Elder looked very confused. Why did Ling Han want to know about that? This was no secret martial arts technique, nor did it involve any ancient secret. Why had Ling Han deliberately come here just to ask this one question? No matter how he thought about it, this was a bit foolish. But how could it be that Ling Han was foolish or bored? First Elder pondered the question, then asked, "Can you tell me why you wanted to know about this?" Ling Han smiled faintly, and answered, "My ancestor could have some relation to the founder of the Cold Spear Association, so I wanted to clarify things." First Elder gave a YA, and asked, "Your surname is Ling. Could it be that you are a descendant of that person?" Ling Han answered, "More or less." He was naturally not about to explain the details to him. He was not the descendant of the Ling Han from 10,000 years ago, but the person himself. There are a total of 3 founders of the Cold Spear Association, and they are Chen Ruijing, Lord Chen, Yun Yong Wang, Lord Yun, and Tang Xiu Yuan, Lord Kang. First Elder replied very piously, brightness flickering in his eyes. Subconsciously, His hands had joined together, seeming to be worshipping these three people. Indeed. Then, the other cold spear association must have been established by Jiang Yufeng. However, the two cold spear associations were completely incompatible with each other. Could it be that some conflict had arisen between Jiang Yufeng and the other three? Ling Han considered something for a moment, then asked, "These three, have they all ascended into the immortal realm?" "Of course," First Elder declared proudly. "The three lords have naturally long since become immortals, and through an amazing technique, connected to the lower realm and established the Cold Spear Association to the remnants Grandmaster Ling left behind." Ling Han frowned deeply. What exactly was going on here? Jiang Yufeng had definitely become immortal. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to be living 4,000 to 5,000 years. And Jiang Yufeng had a falling out with his fellow disciples, Ling Han deduced, because of the reckoning. Perhaps Jiang Yufeng allied with the 5 sects of the immortal realm. As a result, the other three drew a clear line between themselves and him. Thus, the two cold spear associations became completely incompatible with each other. This was a very logical deduction. But Chen Ruijing and the others also became immortals, so what was going on? According to his understanding of the three of them, they would definitely not defect, so why would they have allied with the 5 sects of the immortal realm? But it was obvious that the skies had not been split open, and if they wanted to become immortals 10,000 years ago, their only choice was to become a member of the 5 sects. All 4 of his disciples could not be depended on. Hold on. Ling Han shook his head. He understood his 4 disciples. They were definitely not that type of person, but he had forgotten one person, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. Could it be that the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden extended a helping hand, and brought his 4 disciples together with her into the immortal realm? Even if Chen Ruijing and the others would rather die than submit, could they match the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden? Furthermore, this woman considered herself to be the mistress. After Ling Han died, would Chen Ruijing and the others dare to defy their master's wife? This was the real logical explanation. Young friend. When the first elder saw Ling Han was spacing out, he could not help but call him a few times. Ling Han snapped out of his daze, and smiled. "Many thanks to First Elder for clearing up my confusion." "Ho, it's just a small matter, don't mention it," First Elder smiled. He could tell that Ling Han had boundless future prospects. As a result, he planned to form an amicable relationship with Ling Han. After all, this was something that only had pros and no cons. Ling Han drew out a great many valuable medicinal herbs, and said, "I have injured a few people of your respected association, and I am really sorry about it. This is a little token of my apology, please do accept." First Elder did not pretend to be reserved. With a casual swipe of his hand, he had stored all these medicinal herbs into his spatial spirit tool. "Young friend, if you encounter any irresolvable danger, there is no harm in coming here. I can ensure your safety no matter how big the danger is." A thought flashed through Ling Han's mind. Was he hinting at the reckoning? However, they had talked quite amiably for 2 strangers, so it would not be proper for him to probe too deeply. Thus, he nodded, and said, "Then, I thank you, First Elder. I beg my leave. I shall not bother to see you out." First Elder smiled. He was in the Shattering Void tier, and Ling Han could somewhat be considered a Heaven tier elite, so he naturally was not qualified for the First Elder to see him out personally. Even if First Elder really said that he wanted to see him out, that would merely be words of courtesy. The world of martial arts had its own rules. Let's go. Hu Niu was already impatient in the first place. She had been torturing Rabbit all this while. The moment she heard that they could leave, she hurriedly grabbed one of Rabbit's legs and dragged him along, causing Rabbit to complain endlessly. Rabbit feared nothing in this world, except for Hu Niu. They walked out the main doors of the Cold Spear Association, and immediately saw a great many people glaring at them. Hu Niu instantly became alert, released Rabbit, and said, "Want to fight? Niu shall accompany." This would have been a very funny thing to hear from the mouth of a 10-year-old child, but even Third Elder and Fifth Elder had been beaten down at her hands. Who would dare treat it as a harmless joke from a child? Rabbit rubbed his backside, his face laden with grief. Being dragged out all this way, Lord Rabbit was feeling tremendous stress. Why was this brat still completely unscathed? Everyone was confused. No matter how they thought about it, there was no way that Ling Han could possibly match the shattering void tear. But then, how did he walk out completely uninjured like this? Haha, the False Cold Spear Association will always be the False Cold Spear Association. To actually have an intruder freely come and go like this, how humiliating. Although the members of the Northern Spear Association were extremely displeased, the fact was that Ling Han had indeed walked out completely unharmed, so what else could they say in retort? Ling Han smiled, and said, I arrived in front of the First Elder, and realized I was far from being able to match him. Thus, I admitted my loss and apologized. First Elder treasures talent, and so allowed me to leave. Since the First Elder was so amicable, he naturally would not mind degrading himself a bit to protect the pride of the Northern Spear Association. When they heard him say so, the members of the Northern Spear Association immediately smiled. So it seemed that the First Elder valued his talent and so did not move against Ling Han. Furthermore, Ling Han admitted that he was not the First Elder's match, which naturally recovered the pride of the Northern Spear Association. Although they still felt a little unhappy about how Ling Han had come out without a scratch on him. My 3 elders, his Ling Han, Mu Fei Yarrow suddenly exclaimed. So his Ling Han? The 3 elders of the Southern Spear Association turned to look at Ling Han simultaneously, looking murderous. Exactly. Mu Fei Yarrow stated solemnly. Young friend, immediately change your name, one of the old men said, commanding Ling Han. These 3 old men were 3rd Elder, 4th Elder, and 8th Elder of the Southern Spear Association respectively. The speaker was precisely the 4th Elder. Ling Han could not help but smile, and asked, why? Because you are unqualified. 8th Elder continued. Ling Han shook his head, and said, you all revere a historical person, that is your freedom, but you cannot influence others. What name I call myself is my freedom, and no business of yours. Neither is it something that you can take charge of. So this means you will refuse unless you're forced to do so? 8th Elder asked darkly. Damn old man, why are you acting all fierce? Nyo jumped out, pointed at him, and declared, Nyo wants to beat you up. 8th Elder would naturally pay no attention to a little girl, and only acted as if he had not heard her speak. Actually dare to ignore Nyo. Nyo is angry now. Nyo swung Rabbit in one hand, and directly flung him at 8th Elder. Fuck, whom did Lord Rabbit offend? Rabbit screamed as he shot out like an artillery shell. Chapter 825, Fainted in Fury. Chapter 825, Fainted in Fury. Peng, Rabbit flew unusually fast and severely smashed into the face of 8th Elder. And it wasn't over yet. Rabbit had its own attacking attributes. Its 4 paws paused for a moment before clawing wildly at 8th Elder's face, instantly causing his face to be full of scratch marks and bleed continuously. Everyone who had been watching became completely speechless. At least, the members of the Northern Spear Association were aware that Nyo was indeed incomparably powerful, but would never have imagined that even a rabbit was this powerful as well, actually being able to reduce 8th Elder of the Southern Spear Association to such a pathetic state. The rabbit looked at himself from head to toe, sighed in relief, and patted his chest with lingering fear as he spoke. Scared Lord Rabbit to death. Thankfully, I was not injured. This scene caused everyone irritation. Of course you aren't hurt. The one injured is 8th Elder. Pity that 8th Elder, who was actually an elite of the Heaven tier. How could he be humiliated to such a miserable state in public? Also, how could a rabbit open its mouth to speak? 8th Elder was so angry that his entire body trembled. With a trembling finger, he pointed at he became short of breath, and almost passed out completely. It was really humiliating. He was a Heaven tier elite, yet ended up in such a pitiful state. It was really horrible and despicable. You what? This Lord Rabbit hasn't even complained. Old fart. Your face was really tough and almost broke this Lord Rabbit's claws. Can you afford to compensate me? The rabbit said as he glared fiercely. 8th Elder immediately shifted his hatred onto the rabbit. This rabbit was simply bringing his own taunting effect, provoking others the moment it opened its mouth. Die. He flew out with a slap aimed towards the rabbit. "Little ancestor, help!" the rabbit screamed. It was only in the deity transformation tier, but possessed a powerful bloodline. That was why previously it was able to injure the 8th elder by clawing him. But now, how could it be a match for him in a direct confrontation? The rabbit ran quickly. With a show, it was already hiding behind Hunyo. He then poked his head out and pointed his claw at the 8th elder. "Little ancestor, hit him." Hunyo rolled up her sleeves. Fighting and such was what she liked the most. When the 8th elder missed his aim and slammed through the air, he turned around at once and directed a punch towards Hunyo. The punch expelled out an endless brilliance as unmatched formidable martial intent overflowed from it. In a fit of rage caused by shame, he had no regard of this being within Cold City, and directly bombarded the target with his full strength. At this moment, he strongly desired to annihilate everyone to prevent disclosure of today's incident so that no one would ever know how he had been humiliated. Hong, the strike came, and it was incredibly terrifying. Hunyo grabbed the rabbit from behind her back, lifted it, and flung it forward to smash towards the 8th elder again. "Fuck, why is it Lord Rabbit again?" Rabbit screamed. Peng, the rabbit once again smashed onto the 8th elder's face. It possessed a powerful bloodline and a body different from a normal rabbit's. Thus, this one smash caused the 8th elder to become disoriented and dizzy. However, that was trivial. With Ashwa, Shua, the rabbit again clawed madly at the 8th elder's face before fleeing away. You. 8th elder pointed at Hunyo and the rabbit, gasping as he unexpectedly ran short of breath. Suddenly, he stumbled and his body fell to the ground. Members of the Southern Spear Association quickly went up to gather around him. Then, one by one, they cried out in alarm and bore a weird expression. The 8th elder has passed out. In their eyes, a heaven-tier elite was the world's most invincible and unmatched existence. And yet, this elite had actually fainted from anger because of a few tricks coming from a little girl and a talking rabbit. Who could accept this? Everything happened as if this was a dream. Keikukik. Hunyo held her sides as she roared with laughter and clapped her hands earnestly. "This is fun, really fun. Whom will we play with next?" Her gaze swept back and forth between the faces of the 3rd elder and 4th elder, causing these two old guys to feel tremendous pressure. They saw Hunyo's attack earlier with their own eyes. There was nothing fancy about her attack, it was just very quick. However, it was this speed that made them fearful, and their hearts were thumping rapidly. Although old 8th's strength was slightly weaker than theirs, the gap in strength between them wasn't large. Even if it had been them earlier instead, it would have had the same outcome. Ling Han laughingly said, "Now, is there still anyone who wishes to force me to change my name?" Members of the Southern Spear Association were all angry, but dared not voice their resentment. The 8th elder had been made to faint from anger, while the other 2 elders had suddenly become mute, so what more could they say? "Let's go." Ling Han snapped his fingers. "Let's go." Hunyo hopped forward cheerfully, grabbing Rabbit's long ears and dragging it along with her. "Ah, you are abusing animals," the rabbit screamed. Mu Fei Yarrow looked on with wide eyes and an expression full of surprise. When she'd first seen Ling Han, the strength of the other party was extremely weak, she could kill him with just one finger. Now, she had just stepped into the flower blossom tier, but the other party had grown to a height that she could only look up to. Thinking of herself being previously spanked by Ling Han, her pretty face couldn't help but become hot gradually, and her behind also seemed to become a little itchy. Ling Han returned to the capital of the Purple Moon Empire. This return trip took up almost 10 days. Ma Duo Bao should have resolved the totem's issue, and be about to head into the final battle with the 5 great sects. He wouldn't want to miss such a good show. Sure enough, when he returned to the palace, a sword's virtual image could be seen above the palace the totem. Ling Han could sense that presently, this sword had condensed a considerable amount of the power of the people's will, enough to suppress flower blossom tier cultivators. Really amazing, it had only been a few days. However, the establishment of the Purple Moon Empire was much earlier than that of the Great Ling Empire. Now, it was only to let the people of the nation have a target or object for their belief. Naturally, it was easy to condense the power of the people's hearts. In a few days, the totem had advanced to a considerable height. The middle state was already big, and the overall level of martial arts was considerably high. Perhaps it would not take long for this totem to rival the shattering void tier. Ho ho, my tanned brother, just as I thought, after forming a real nation, with just the middle state alone being so huge, it was almost enough to fill me to bursting point. Ma Duo Bao sighed. Ling Han frowned, and said, Brother Ma, you have recultivated the body, but still can't endure such strong power of the nation. How much power of the nation can be endured is determined by two aspects. One is the level of your own cultivation, and the other is having a tyrannically strong body. When it comes to cultivation tier, I'm already in the 9th layer of the shattering void tier, and thus, it's impossible to advance further. My body has reached level 10 precious metals toughness, but it's also the limit. Ma Duo Bao shook his head, appearing somewhat pitiful. But then, he immediately smiled. However, compared to the last time, the power of the nation which I could accommodate this time had at least doubled. There should be a 30% chance of success to split open the sky. Only 30%. Ling Han was surprised. Firstly, it was because of Ma Duo Bao's strength, given his battle prowess was definitely more than 15 stars. Furthermore, his body had reached level 10 precious metals toughness, which made him practically invincible and without equal in this world. Having this kind of strength and body, coupled with the power of the nation, the success rate of splitting open the sky was still only 30%. This was astonishing indeed. What if it was him? Ling Han thought to himself that as long as his cultivation level could reach the shattering void tier, then his body would be able to reach the level of divine metal, and the power of the nation that he could accommodate would far exceed Ma Duo Bao's. And his own martial prowess wasn't any inferior. Comparing the two of them, what would be the rate of success for him to split open the sky? Chapter 826, Storming into the Heaven's Sword Sect. Chapter 826, Storming into the Heaven's Sword Sect. Brother Ma, if the matter can't be done, why not leave it to me? Ling Han made a cutting gesture against the sky. It was no joke to split open the sky. Heaven and earth had its spirit, which was equivalent to an independent body. As long as this was the way, it wouldn't allow the integration of another new body, even if it was an elevation. This was the reasoning of better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. Granted, splitting open the sky could be successful, but what if it failed? That would absolutely invoke the wrath of the heaven and earth, with perpetrators struck by lightning. Otherwise, how could the Purple Moon Empire be destroyed in the past? If worse comes to worst, they could try again after a period of time. Try again, and perhaps they might just succeed once. When they slept, it would be for several millennia. Perhaps this was their intention to avoid the revenge from heaven and earth. Ma Duo Bao shook his head, and said, There is not much time left for us. If we wait until there is movement from above, then we would certainly lose initiative. The immortals would come when it was time to concoct the realm pill. While the descended immortals would only be limited to the shattering void tier, their battle prowess was absolutely formidable, and it was basically impossible for them to be killed. If there were many people rushing forth in the midst of battle, then how would you split open the sky? Ling Han nodded. What they were lacking now was time. You're reading on Novelful, thanks. The next day, they had set up camp and moved forward to battle with the 5 great sects. From the point of view of mortals, there were thousands of miles separating the 5 great sects, far beyond reasonable limits. However, in the eyes of shattering void tier elites, this little distance was only a day's journey. Thus, the 5 great sects were very close to each other, which made mutually supporting one another extremely easy. When Ma Duo Bao arrived at the front line, the remaining 7 kings had gathered. They joined up with him and the Lunar King, and then set out toward the Heaven's Sword Sect. Needless to say, the elites of the 5 great sects would surely converge in the Heaven's Sword Sect for the decisive battle with the Purple Moon Empire. Aside from the Heavenly Astral King, the Lunar King and the Flame King, the other 5 kings were Great Water King, Justice Mountain King, Clear Solar King, Pure Golden King, and Opulent Peace King 1. All 8 of them were shattering void tier elites with battle prowess of 15 stars, terrifyingly formidable. Along the way, Obviously there were people attempting to stop their advance. However, the 8 kings needed only casually strike, and they would naturally sweep past the obstacles, step by step pressing on towards the main gate of the Heaven's Sword sect. There were not many people in their party. In addition to Ling Han's group of 3, Ma Duo Bao had only brought the 8 kings and 1,000 elite troops. However, each and every one of this 1,000 were all high-level heaven-tier cultivators. Furthermore, they were also experts in combined assaults of formation arts, and their battle prowess was sufficient to rival high-level shattering void-tier cultivators. The disciples of the Heaven's Sword sect were defeated as they journeyed on. Soon, the army arrived in front of the main gate of the Heaven's Sword sect. They couldn't proceed any further, because there was a protective formation in place. "Leave it to me." Pure Golden King came out, brandishing a golden spear. He held it on his chest, while his eyes turned into 2 golden stars. On the tip of the spear, power was condensed into a light ball. At first it was only the size of an egg, but no matter how hard he tried condensing the power, it had just turned into the size of a watermelon, and would not get any bigger. Ling Han watched while his blood began to run cold. This power from this one strike would be absolutely terrifying. Among the 3 styles of black origin, the last type was called breaking limits, whereby one would need to stand still and gather strength for a few minutes. Once the attack was launched, it would utilize the whole person's strength. When used in battle, it would simply be an act of courting death. However, if it was used to break a protective formation, this was indeed a clever move. Was there an unbreakable defense in this world? No. There wasn't an unbreakable one. If it did not break, the only explanation was that not enough force had been exerted. Therefore, the name of breaking limits really held true. This attack by Pure Golden King would have the same effect despite using a different approach. He would never use it against the enemy during the battle. However, given that he now had the protection of comrades, he naturally had no qualms about slowly gathering strength to blast out the most powerful strike. After at least 5 minutes, Pure Golden King finally took a step forward. However, with this one step, he had already come in front of the defensive barrier created by the formation. He took aim with his spear. Pu. The tip of the spear pointed towards the defensive formation, and suddenly there was endless brilliance, so dazzling that the surrounding people's eyes couldn't even open. Boom! The ground was shaking. Heaven's Sword Mountain was also shaking as the defensive barrier nearly collapsed, but it ultimately stabilized. As strong as the Pure Golden King was, this one shot of power condensed over 5 minutes actually did not break through the defensive formation. Ha 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 ha. The other 7 kings roared with laughter, all of them thrown into disorder and not bothering to keep their image. Old 7th, you have indeed regressed. How could you not destroy the defensive formation with a single shot? Did you use too much effort last night? Hey, young people need to know how to control themselves. Don't always keep doing those things all day long. One by one, the 7 kings ridiculed him without mercy. The Pure Golden King's expression became serious. He said, "This formation is indeed much stronger than when we first came." Ma Duo Bao opened his mouth to speak, helping his trusted retainer out of embarrassment. "This is normal. After it was defeated by us in the past, the 5 great sects would have painstakingly striven to strengthen the defensive formation. Therefore, it is normal for my dear subject not to be able to break through this formation. It has just blocked one blow from me. Let me try again, and within a day's time, I will surely blast down this formation." Pure Golden King snorted, not giving up. "There isn't much time for you to waste." The Lunar King swayed gently with grace as she came out. "Let me do it. 4th sister, let me do it." Pure Golden King refused to give in since this was no joke, this was a matter of saving face. "What? You think you can disobey me just because you're a little stronger now? Should I properly teach you a lesson?" The Lunar King licked her red lips, and her charming eyes turned soft, giving off a dangerous aura. Pure Golden King immediately became frightened. One couldn't be fooled by this 4th sister's gracefulness and appearance of an alluring woman, as her temper was very explosive. She even dared to hit His Majesty, what more him? If he were to count the number of times he was beaten up in the past, it would definitely give him a trauma. "Fine, let me do it." Ma Duo Bao walked out with his big belly and smiled. It's all right not to break this formation. Anyway, we just have to pass through it. Just making an opening will do. Doesn't this mean we have to squeeze in? Your Majesty, your requirement is really too low. The Lunar King immediately opposed it. That right. Boss, that isn't domineering enough. It's better to blast through it. The other 7 kings added on. Ma Duo Bao laughed with an amiable expression. His little eyes squinted into crescents. He said, "My beloved kings, do you bear any dissatisfaction towards me?" The 8 kings immediately shook their heads, and replied in unison, "No. No." He had to be joking. Their boss usually spoke very courteously, but once he was serious, he became a person who would destroy the gods and knock down Buddha if they were an obstacle in his path. From the beginning, which of them wasn't a ruthless person? And yet, weren't they still beaten into submission by Ma Duo Bao? It's good if there is none, Ma Duo Bao said, all smiles. He casually stroked a few fingers, Kwong, and the defensive barrier of the formation immediately revealed a gap. The gap was cut into a large opening, enough to accommodate the army. So powerful. In his heart, Ling Han was dumbstruck. Earlier, the pure Golden King had wanted to break the formation, while Ma Duo Bao had only created a passage. The difficulty could not be compared, but having such a destructive power with just a few casual strokes, it really made sense for Ma Duo Bao to become the boss of the 8 kings. He raised his head and saw that the Heaven's Sword sect was close at hand. Chapter 8:27 Wager. Chapter 8:27 Wager. When was the last time he came to the Heaven's Sword sect? Ling Han could not help but look dazed, as if he had returned to 10,000 years ago. He was invited by the Sword Emperor and came here to concoct alchemical pills. It was here that he managed to con the 3 techniques of black origin from the Sword Emperor. 10,000 years had passed, and nothing seemed to have changed here at all. It looked just like it looked those many years ago. Woo! The bugle horn sounded, and innumerable people flew out from various spots in the mountains. This protection mountain great formation had been broken, so every member of the 5 sects naturally moved out. The aura of powerful elites undulated, shockingly frightening. If these people combined their forces and attacked at the same time, would this realm collapse instantly? However, it should not go that far with the existence of the Eye of Heavenly Tao. It would definitely interfere to maintain the stability of this realm. To the Eye of Heavenly Tao, as long as the regulation of this realm was not destroyed, then no matter how many people you killed, it would not care. Azure Phoenix Divine Empress, Beast Snake King, and the others were all here. Upon careful estimation, the shattering Void Tier elites here actually numbered in the hundreds, which proved that the 5 great sects had indeed revealed all their cards, intending to have a fight to the death with the Purple Moon Empire here. After this battle, the world would be at peace. A feeling of disbelief rose up in Ling Han. This was a little too easy, wasn't it? But when he thought about it again, the Purple Moon Empire had indeed grasped an overwhelming amount of power. Even if Ma Duo Bao himself had not moved, the 8 kings had already thrashed the 5 sects severely. In the end, they could only be trapped here and guard this last piece of territory. That the final battle would happen now seemed understandable. Respected guests have come from afar, please forgive us for not coming out to receive you. An old man who looked very amiable walked out. He was tall and slender, with a full head of white hair and a white beard. Wearing garments of coarse cloth and hemp, he seemed filled with a sage-like air. When he walked out, even those like the Sword King and the Azure Phoenix Divine Empress tacitly took a step back to offset his position. By now, those that could stand together with this old man were 4 similarly white-haired elders, 3 men and 1 woman. They were absolutely antiques, and one could clearly see that their vitality was declining. It was very strange. The 5 sects obviously possessed the time liquid and could seal off the lapsing of their life energy. After the reckoning, they could ascend to the immortal realm and have another breakthrough. After they had become immortals, their lifespan would gain a terrifying increase. Ho ho, is this meant to deal with powerful enemies like ourselves? Justice Mountain King smirked. It is impossible to break through to become immortals in this realm. So, the more time you spend, the more possible it is to advance further in the level of the Shattering Void tier, increasing your battle prowess to 15 stars, 16 stars, or even more, the Flame King continued. However, 14 stars would be a milestone, and the breaching of every subsequent star would be as difficult as climbing up to the heavens. Even Shattering Void tier elites only have just slightly over 1,000 years of life. So what if you had spent your whole life on study and research? Your talent is a cold, hard truth. If you are only capable of reaching 12 stars of battle prowess in the prime of your life, then even until you die of age, your highest level would be 14 stars at most. The 8 kings offered their comments one after another, completely indifferent and treating these 5 elders as if they were empty air. Ho ho, I've long heard that the 8 kings are unprecedented heroes, and their divine techniques are invincible. Today, I have finally seen it for myself. That old antique from before was not angered, either. Instead, he smiled, and asked, "Why don't we set ourselves a wager? Just a bunch of losers, what right do you have to make a wager with us?" The 8 kings sneered. "Are you afraid?" The old man provoked. Though the heroic spirits of the 8 kings reached the clouds, they would definitely not act rashly. None of them replied. They had come to deal with the 5 sects, and not for some kind of wager. Yet Ma Duo smiled, and asked, "What kind of wager?" "We are all cultivators, so the wager is naturally regarding ability." That old man smiled. "Both sides will send out 9 people to fight a one-on-one battle. The side that wins 5 rounds would be winning this wager." The 8 kings stared blankly. 9 rounds? Were you sure? Could it be that you know that them 8 kings along with Ma Duo were precisely 9 people, and just happened to be strongest battle prowess of the Purple Moon Empire? This kind of one-on-one battle was practically the strong suit of the Purple Moon Empire. Using one's shortcoming against their opponent's strength, were they so stupid? But, there were so many sly old foxes in the 5 sects, how could all of them be fools? Ma Duo continued to ask, "What happens if we win? And what happens if we lose?" This was the key of the matter. If they lost, and the consequences were practically harmless, then they'd just go ahead with the wager. The old man stated, "If we lose, we shall surrender to the Purple Moon Empire, and you may do as you like with us." With these words, even the 8 kings were moved. Had they nothing else to do? Become idiots? Or been kicked by an ass? Ma Duo smiled faintly, seeming to be completely uncaring, and asked, "Then what if we lost? Within 100 years, you all must not go to arms." The old man raised a single upright finger. The conditions of this wager were practically very unfair. If the 5 sects lost, their lives or deaths would be completely up to them, but if the Purple Moon Empire lost, they would only be unable to go to arms for 100 years. For an ordinary person, 100 years were his whole life. But for the Shattering Void tier, 100 years could only be considered the equivalent of 10 years of a normal lifespan. Ma Duo looked confused. The only thing the 5 sects had to rely on were the numbers of their Shattering Void tier. As the saying went, a great number of ants could kill an elephant. Strength came from numbers. However, he was naturally unafraid. Aside from he himself, no one knew what extent his strength reached. Now, the 5 sects had given up their numerical advantage, and desired a one-on-one battle with them. This was pitifully foolish of them. What reason was there behind their actions? The old man raised another finger, smiled, and said, "However, we have one condition." So this was the main point. And that is, "Your Majesty cannot participate in the battles." Ma Duo could not participate. This indeed caused the Purple Moon Empire to be short of a very strong fighter, but the problem here was the 8 kings were practically invincible. So far, aside from that giant silver spider in the ancient mine of Fire Country and Yi Shuang Shuang, there should be no one alive with 15 stars of Shattering Void tier of battle prowess, right? Even if the 5 sects managed to get these 2 esteemed beings to help them, and the 8 kings lost 2 rounds, weren't there still 6 rounds they were guaranteed to win? How strange. "Do you dare?" the old general asked. Ma Duo hummed slightly, then nodded, and said, "All right, I shall agree to this wager." The other side had over 100 Shattering Void tier elites, after all. As long as a few of them managed to escape successfully, and wrought havoc and destruction in the wider world, that would be enough to cause tremendous damage to power of the nation. Thus, if he could subdue the enemy troops without actually going to arms, that would be the best strategy. The old man laughed, and said, "If that is so, then in the first round, we shall first send out someone, and the next round will be your turn. In this way, we will take turns. How about it?" "Agreed." Ma Duo Bao assented. "Anyun, you will fight in the first round," the old man said. "Yes," the Sword King answered. He walked on air and stopped about 100 li one above the mountain peak, and asked, "8 kings, who among you would be fighting with me?" "I'll go." The Lunar King rose up into the skies as well, and stood on the same level as the Sword King. In this first round, it was obvious that the Purple Moon Empire was sure to win. The Sword King was indeed very strong. He had comprehended Sword Heart, but he had not yet reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. His battle prowess did not yet reach 11 stars, so how could he be a match for the Lunar King? This was a battle between two opponents who were on two completely different levels. "Please." The Sword King was unafraid, though. With a sword seal formed on his fingers, he seemed graceful and poised. Chapter 828, Surprise Reinforcements. Chapter 828, Surprise Reinforcements. After exchanging greetings, the Sword King immediately displayed his might, unleashing a sword strike. It was precisely the 10,000 techniques returned to one, which condensed into a 300-meter-long sword ray, slashing towards the Lunar King. The Lunar King, however, seemed totally unconcerned, reaching out with her hand and grabbing Sword King's sword ray. She clenched it, and the sword ray instantly shattered, turning into endless pieces and falling down. She nodded, and said, "Your talent isn't bad." After reaching the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier, cultivating arduously for another 100 years to increase battle prowess, you can attempt to reach 15 stars of battle prowess. This was a very high evaluation, at least up till now. 15 stars Shattering Void tier was the strongest battle prowess. Ma Duo Bao hadn't truly showed his hand, while Helian Tianyun was glory from countless years ago, and at most only returned to the spiritual infant tier by now. Ling Han acknowledged it on the inside. Those who were able to comprehend the heart of martial arts were definitely exceptional talents, and were definitely impressive in battles at the same tier. The Sword King didn't reply. He had become well known long ago, being the finest elite in the world to begin with, but now, despite it being a compliment, how could he possibly be glad about being treated like a junior? He swung his sword, the sword chi imposing, shining over the world. Even heaven and earth paled, and only his sword danced between heaven and earth as if it could split even them. Powerful, he was really powerful. Unfortunately, his opponent was the Lunar King. 4 stars of a gap in strength wasn't something that any effort and imposing manner could change. The Lunar King casually swatted the sword lights that came assaulting her, easily extinguishing them. After exchanging about 100 moves, the Lunar King finally got serious, and shot the Sword King down from the sky with a single slap, making him lose battle power completely. The first battle, Purple Moon Empire won. This time, it was Purple Moon Empire's turn to send someone out to battle. The Flame King took the field, while the other side sent the Azure Phoenix Divine Empress. The Azure Phoenix Divine Empress was unexpectedly the first to reach the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier, her normal battle prowess reaching 11 stars, and she also had the advantage of her blood linear as her wings spread. Her battle prowess rocketed to 13 stars. This was extremely terrifying. She could run over the North Sea's royal clan by herself. However, against the Flame King, this wasn't enough, and soon she was defeated, adding a second defeat to the 5 great sects side. Ling Han had thought that the 5 sects would send out some mysterious expert in the second round. For example, an elite from the Sea tribe, their imperial clan, might have supreme elites of 15 stars. But, by the looks of it now, the other party seemed to have given up. This was completely off. The 5 great sects had deep roots in the divine realm, so how could they surrender so easily? There was definitely something off. Ling Han spread out his divine sense in attempt to find out whether the 5 great sects were taking advantage of the situation to lay down a killing formation, only using the wager to buy time and in reality attempting to kill them all in one go. They didn't tamper with anything, Ma Duo Bao said. He also had a puzzled look. Ling Han obviously trusted his judgment. Although Ma Jiubao had almost never displayed his strength, Ling Han believed that Ma Jiubao was definitely the world's #1 expert at the current stage, the one and only. In the future, Helian Tianyun should be able to compare against Ma Jiubao, and after he himself advanced to the Shattering Void tier, he wouldn't fear the enemies, either. Even Black Tower's power boost could allow him to win instantly. But now, Ma Jiubao was definitely the world's strongest, and since he said there was no ambush, then there definitely was no ambush. Soon, 2 more battles were over. The Heavenly Astral King and the Grand Water King each added a victory to Purple Moon Empire. Now, once the 5 sects lost 1 more match, there'd be no need to fight anymore, as they would have lost 5 matches. Was it really that easy? Hehe, it's come to the 5th match that quickly. The old man from previously coughed, and said, Zhuoqifang, you take this match. The crowd separated as a youngster walked out. He was truly young, his blood and chi were vigorous like a furnace, soaring straight into sky. The relative age definitely wouldn't surpass 20, the stage when the body was growing. So even if he was in the Shattering Void tier, he would be at most 200 years old. And this youngster was really in the Shattering Void tier. This humble one is Zhuoqifang. The youngster walked with his hands behind his back, appearing extremely nonchalant. I'm 19 this year. Those words were enough to see his pride, else why announce his age? I was a Shattering Void tier elite at 19. If I wasn't impressive, who was? Ling Han, Ma Jiubao, and the 8 kings all revealed shocked looks. A 19-year-old Shattering Void tier elite was too ridiculous. Ling Han was walking down the old route again, but he was almost 21 years old now, and still hadn't returned to the Heaven tier, and there was at least 2 to 3 years' time before he'd reach the Shattering Void tier. However, Ling Han's speed was already more than fast enough. He was even suppressing his own cultivation to avoid unstable foundations, which would influence his progress in the future. A 19-year-old Shattering Void tier elite? What the hell? How much spirit medicine did he take to achieve it? Such a Shattering Void tier was definitely a paper tiger, and anyone at the first layer of the Shattering Void tier could defeat him. Ma Jiubao stared at Zhuoqifang. After a while, his expression became extremely stern as he said, this person's in the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier and is very, very strong. Even he used 2 very, so it could be seen how cautious he was. The 8 kings were all shocked. Although it was a bit hard to accept that Zhuoqifang was such a young Shattering Void tier elite, there indeed was some divine medicine that allowed people to reach the heavens in a single bound. However, going from the 1st layer of the Shattering Void tier to the 9th layer, several tens of years wouldn't be long at all. A 19-year-old boy in the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier, this was truly surprising. Who could compare against him? Probably only Hunyosha was only 1 step away from the Shattering Void tier. With her freakishness, going from 1st layer to the 9th layer wouldn't take much time. There was a 99% chance for her to reach humanity's peak at 19 years old. In the world, there was actually a second person as freakish as Hunyo. Who will fight me? Zhuoqifang taunted. Don't make me wait too long. The Justice Mountain King was annoyed by his arrogance, so he jumped out immediately, and said, this king will. Alright, I'll give you pointers, Zhuoqifang said loftily. The Justice Mountain King laughed out of extreme anger, and said, then let's fight in the skies. No need, 1 move is enough to subdue you. There's no need to waste time, Zhuoqifang said with a smile. These words were obviously even more arrogant. The Justice Mountain King was instantly furious. His entire body was bound by lightning, while his hands formed seals as golden light shot in all directions. The thunderclap 9th heaven and the earth overturning seal. Ling Han nodded inwardly. The 8 kings obviously knew each other's mystical powers, and each person grasped not only a single one. Zhuoqifang revealed a curious look, and said, mystical powers? Hehe, I'm rather interested to see them. He actually still had his hands behind his back. Such arrogance was beyond overblown. The Justice Mountain King let out a furious battle cry, and his figure charged out. With a Z, he turned into lightning, moving extremely quickly. After turning into lightning, his speed was already shocking, and on top of the shattering void tier standing on top of humanity's peak, the speed was even more terrifying. Justice Mountain King's body left an afterimage in its original place, but his real body already charged in front of Zhuoqifang, launching a hand seal right at Zhuoqifang's chest as an array of golden light was shot out in all directions. Peng! As earth-overturning seal pressed down, Zhuoqifang was instantly smashed into pieces. For a shattering void tier elite, splitting into pieces was simply splitting into pieces, having no relation to death at all. He could completely reform his body, but he would definitely suffer heavy injuries. Then, this battle would obviously be his defeat, which would mean that the wager would be lost. Hehe, a little interesting, but still not fast enough. Zhuoqifang's voice sounded. His body perfectly whole. The shattered body was also an afterimage. Chapter 829, Consecutive Defeats. Chapter 829, Consecutive Defeats. The 8 kings' expressions changed drastically at the same time, while thunderous cheers sounded from the 5 great sects' side. Zhuoqifang stood loftily, hands behind his back, and said smilingly, "Can you be faster? Otherwise, you won't be able to catch me." Justice Mountain King's expression turned stern. Ma Duobao's evaluation of this person was very, very strong, using 2 very. Although Zhuoqifang had only displayed his terrifying speed so far, his battle prowess was probably not weak, either, or else he wouldn't be worth Ma Duobao's evaluation. Justice Mountain King crossed both hands as an endless imposing presence circulated. The power of laws. Zhuoqifang frowned. Now that's somewhat problematic. One move can't take care of things. If he said that earlier, everyone wouldn't believe him. Defeating the 8 kings was a completely unrealistic thing, and you still wanted to defeat him in one move? But after he displayed the astonishing speed, his words suddenly held more weight, and people couldn't help but wonder. Perhaps he truly was extremely powerful. After all, from 15 stars onwards, there was still 5 from 20 stars. Why couldn't he be at 16 stars, 17 stars, 19 stars, or even 20 stars? Justice Mountain King shouted harshly, and as lightning flickered, he charged towards Zhuoqifang again with golden hand seals fluttering all over the sky. Zhuoqifang only shifted his feet to evade, shuffling freely through the array of golden light. However, Justice Mountain King also used the power of laws this time. Unlike Ling Han, who was only able to deploy it with his left hand, lines formed and slowly wove into a web, enveloping Zhuoqifang. Retract. Justice Mountain King groaned, retracting the web of laws as if catching fish. Zhuoqifang had nowhere to run. Zhuoqifang, however, smiled faintly, extending a finger and pressing it forward. Open. Wang, a faint light flickered on his finger as the web of laws immediately split open, and he walked out unhurriedly with a smile, and said, "That will count as one move, and I'll use one more move to suppress you." He attacked with a finger again. A giant 3,000-meter-long finger instantly appeared in the sky and pressed towards Justice Mountain King. As the giant finger swept by, the air was ignited, and all things were annihilated. 18 stars, the Lunar King and the other kings all cried out at the same time, looks of disbelief on their faces. The power of this attack actually reached 18 stars. Hong! The giant finger pressed down, mountains crumbled and the ground shattered, the blazing sun paled, and countless stars fell down from the sky. Everyone was struck dumb. Was this really something the power of man could do? Was this not the might unleashed by a divine being? However, the eye of heavenly Tao didn't appear, meaning that this was still an attack unleashed at the peak of humanity. Several elites intervened one after another, sweeping away the dust all over the sky, yet the place where Justice Mountain King was standing had already become empty, and there was no trace of him or fragments of his body. "We've lost this battle," Ma Duobao said, holding the Justice Mountain King in his arms. If he hadn't intervened just now, Justice Mountain King probably would have been heavily injured, if not dead. 18 stars against 15 stars, this was an overwhelming difference in power. He. Zhuoqifang looked at Ma Duobao, and said, "Your battle prowess should have reached 20 stars, right?" The 8 kings were enraged at once. He was their liege, and while they could laugh at and joke with him normally, they definitely didn't allow others to be disrespectful to him. Ma Duobao didn't answer, however, and asked in return, "You should be from the divine realm, right? You also used the power of laws just now, but it differed greatly from the realm power of this realm." What? Everyone was startled. From the divine realm? This rather explained why he was already in the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier while being so young and why his battle prowess even reached 18 stars. However, the problem was, why would the divine realm send people down at this time? Zhuo Qifeng laughed loudly, and said, "We can't hide it from you as expected. That's right, I am indeed from the divine realm, and very much want to fight with you. However, 20 stars of battle prowess. This is called the extreme battle prowess, even I have no certainty of coming out unscathed." He admitted it. Ling Han's heart thumped fiercely. The reason why the 5 sects planned such a wager seemed very obvious. Qifeng definitely wasn't the only one who came down from the divine realm. Yes, it should be 5, and if Ma Jiao was kicked aside, they could guarantee 5 victories. Who would have thought that the divine realm would send people down? To send divine beings down, the expense paid is too great, so only a few Shattering Void tier elites came, Zhuo Qifeng kindly explained. But this is enough. After all, we're from the divine realm. Clear Solar King walked out, and said, "I'll go next round. Who will fight this king?" Xiao, a young girl with almond-shaped eyes and jade-like nose, jumped out, also surprisingly young, beautiful as if she came out of a painting. Her figure was slender, her thin waist could be held with one hand, and her chest undulated slightly, forming an elegant curve. The 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. Needless to say, she was definitely also a genius from the divine realm, a genius trained by the divine realm's 5 sect. In comparison, the lower realm's geniuses like Shu Xiuran, Small Sword Emperor, and Dongling paled, and not just by a little bit. The divine realm's resources were definitely far above those of the lower realm. If the finest geniuses that were trained couldn't reach such a standard, then that would be wrong, wouldn't it? The problem was whether these two people represented the 5 sects strongest amongst the younger generation or not. Xiao Miaoyan, the young girl, said indifferently. Although her expression was calm, deep disdain could be seen within her eyes. It was plain disdain. The lower realm, in her eyes, was the synonym of lowly. Merely being a medicinal farm providing them with the realm pillet obviously made her look down on it with disdain. Clear Solar King obviously didn't dare to be careless at all, unleashing the strongest move at once. He didn't learn the thunderclap 9th heaven, but his body turned into flames, forming a sea of flames, flashing towards Xiao Miaoyan. It was even hotter than the sun, forcing many Shattering Void tier elites to confine the high temperature within a designated area, or else it would definitely cause a terrifying calamity. Xiao Miaoyan, however, was unafraid as 2 wings spread behind her back, spanning at least 300 meters, enveloping her, completely unharmed by the flames that seemed to be able to burn the skies. The Cloud Phoenix sect. Well, it was unknown what they were called in the divine realm. Xiao Miaoyan attacked, and also had shocking battle prowess, suppressing the Clear Solar King in a few moves and gaining 1 more victory. Next, the 5 great sects sent out another 2 young geniuses, Chen Wenxia and Yang Guan, respectively, and they also had 18 stars of battle prowess, turning the tables and reaching a draw after the 8th round. There was one last round. If Ma Jiao could act, he would definitely win for sure, but the other party had already laid out a scheme, excluding him. Not to mention that the 8 kings already took the field once. Even if they could take the field again, would they be the divine realm's geniuses' match? This humble one is Wu Gaoyuan. Who will be my opponent? The 5 sects' last fighter was also extremely young. He was clad in fully white clothing, his bearing elegant. Ma Jiao and the 8 kings frowned. Were they really going to lose? This loss would result in a 100-year-long seclusion, and countless changes could happen. At that time, the divine realm could open a passageway, sending down true divine beings, and anything could happen. They were unwilling to be defeated. "I'll go," Ling Han said. Chapter 830 I'll go. Chapter 830 I'll go. You'll go. Talking was easy, but you were only in the deity transformation tier, so you'd be giving up by taking the field, no? This was no joke. If you were too weak, then let alone receiving 1 attack, you'd be annihilated with just the enemy's aura. Ma Duo Bao didn't believe in Ling Han's prowess, but believed in Ling Han as a person. He only frowned, and said, "You sure?" "Sure." Ling Han nodded. "All right." Ma Duo Bao never did things sloppily. He immediately nodded, and said, "You'll take the last match." "Brother Han." Zhu Xian'er pulled on Ling Han's hand, worry painted all across her face. The opponent wasn't a normal person, but a genius from the divine realm that could look down on the older generation's elites. Even a super elite like the Lunar King couldn't rival him. Ling Han nodded, and said, "Don't worry, I'll be fine." "Ling Han, do your best." Hunyo waved her small hand, cheering for him. "Beat him up, don't give Uncle Rabbit any face," the rabbit shouted on the side. Ling Han walked out in large strides, and said, "This battle, I've accepted." Pu. On the side of the 5 sects, everyone couldn't help laughing loudly. You, a mere deity transformation tier warrior, actually wanted to participate in such a battle? Wasn't that seeking death? Not to mention shattering void tier 18 stars of battle prowess, a normal shattering void tier elite could easily swat him to death. Was this Purple Moon Empire's way of giving up? Indeed, Ma Duo Bao couldn't take the field, so whoever took the field would only suffer defeat. It was all the same no matter who it was. Beast Snake King's expression, however, changed as he said, "This child can't be underestimated. His defensive abilities are extremely, extremely strong." At least, when he'd swatted down with his palm, nothing happened to Ling Han. Such defensive abilities were truly terrifying. Because that matter was somewhat embarrassing, he'd never told anyone, and even made Xu Xiuran keep his mouth shut, so now no one knew that Ling Han's physique was actually comparable to 10th tier rare metal. "You!" Wu Gaoyuan couldn't help but frown. "With my noble status, how could you be fit to fight me?" He felt as if he'd suffered a great humiliation. Purple Moon Emperor's court probably knew that they would lose, so they intentionally sent a deity transformation tier warrior to humiliate him. Damn it, too hateful. His eyes had an ominous glare. Since that was the case, he'd torment Ling Han and see just how much face Ling Han would still have. "Cut the crap, bring it on." Ling Han taunted him with his finger. Wu Gaoyuan already regained his composure, while the fury turned into a baleful murderous aura. He revealed a cruel smile and raised his hand. Instantly, a myriad of silver lights radiated and turned into countless sharp swords, shooting at Ling Han. "Let 10,000 swords pierce your heart." Ling Han didn't parry, and simply used his sword heart. Shua, 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 the sharp swords all swept by his body all around him, yet didn't hurt a single hair. Sword heart. Wu Gaoyuan was slightly taken aback, and then laughed loudly. Not bad, to have actually comprehended the heart of martial arts. This is truly rare. Even in our divine realm, only 1 out of 10 shattering void tier elites can comprehend the heart of martial art. So few. Ling Han said inwardly. The 8 kings all had the heart of martial arts, and quite a few in the 5 sects, like Sword King, Severing Heaven Saber, and even Xu Xiuran and Small Sword Emperor all formed the heart of martial arts. In terms of ratio, this was at least 1/10, and even surpassed it. But thinking again, it was actually normal. Although the divine realm was abundant with cultivation resources that only allowed martial artists to reach the shattering void tier, and an even higher level, at a faster pace, martial arts still had to be personally comprehended. Moreover, since the lower realm lacked in cultivation resources, those that could break through to the shattering void tier were all geniuses amongst geniuses, so the ratio of those comprehending the heart of martial arts would naturally be higher. "I'm somewhat interested." Wu Gaoyuan's killing intent was even more aroused. "It's only interesting to kill such a genius." Not bad, cultivating out sword heart at the deity transformation tier, you should be the first in the lower realm, right? Xu Xiuran and Small Sword Emperor revealed looks of disdain at the same time. They were only born in the lower realm. If they could receive the nourishment of the divine realm's cultivation resources, they definitely wouldn't be weaker than Wu Gaoyuan and the others. Ling Han reached out, hooked his finger at him, and said, "Is your zodiac a donkey? You are so chatty." A vein bulged on Wu Gaoyuan's forehead, and he said threateningly, "Infuriating me? There's no benefit to you at all. You're still blabbering?" Ling Han said disdainfully. "Fuck. Wu Gaoyuan finally couldn't hold back, and unleashed a palm attack. It was still tens of thousands of swords fluttering, yet they were enhanced by a sword heart of his own. Their power was obviously stronger, no longer being affected by Ling Han's sword heart. The full-strength attack at shattering void tier 18 stars. How could it be blocked? It couldn't be blocked. Peng! Ling Han was immediately sent flying like a kite with a broken tail. Wu Gaoyuan snorted, and said, "Is there a need to keep competing?" Of course. Ling Han climbed up from the ground, and exercised his joints. Pa, 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 the bones all over his body crackled, his blood and chi boiling, soaring into the sky. Everyone stared dumbfounded. Was this guy a freak? Before, the Justice Mountain King was almost killed in a single hit, and only thanks to Ma Duobao intervening was the calamity avoided, but Ling Han had suffered such an attack, and was like nothing had happened at all. How could people believe this? He was only in the deity transformation tier, so how could he be so strong? This child's physique is comparable to 10th tier rare metal, a shattering void tier elite exclaimed. The other people of the 5 great sects finally understood, but still couldn't help but grimace. This guy was too freakish. A deity transformation tier warrior that possessed a physique similar to 10th tier rare metal in toughness, wouldn't that almost be invincible in the world? No wonder this guy dared to take the field. This nature-defying physique was equal to standing in an invincible position. HMPH, 10th tier rare metal? Wu Gaoyuan sneered. So what? I'll refine it nevertheless. Ling Han flicked his finger, and said, "Don't just bluff, come fight. If you can't beat me in 10 moves, then you lose. T, you can't just go talking on your own." Wu Gaoyuan snorted, and said, "Who promised you that? You, a shattering void tier elite, and one with 18 stars of battle prowess at that, fighting me, a deity transformation tier warrior, still complain that 10 moves aren't enough? How about I use only one hand against you?" Ling Han said with a smile. The people of the 5 great sects wrinkled their noses in anger. Your damn physique was like 10th tier rare metal, almost unharmable by outside forces, so who could beat you within 10 moves? Moreover, you're only at the deity transformation tier, and your battle prowess wouldn't even be worth mentioning in front of a shattering void tier elite, not to mention one hand. What would it even matter even if it were 4 hands? This brat was truly devious. Wu Gaoyuan was also quite furious. Now, he was really tired of talking to Ling Han, and charged right out, launching attacks at Ling Han. Sure, he unleashed a treasured sword, its chilling glare shocking the skies. It was a 10th tier spirit tool, and was completely activated at this moment, so it was as if another shattering void tier elite had joined the battle. Ling Han was unafraid. He didn't plan on winning, and simply wanted to drag out the last battle into a draw. No matter whether you're 1 or 10 shattering void tier elites, I'll only guard and not attack. So come. Hong. 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 Wu Gaoyuan brandished the 10th tier spirit tool and slashed frenziedly at Ling Han like a demonic god. Chapter 831 Indestructible Body. Chapter 831 Indestructible Body. One had to know that the clash between a 10th tier spirit tool and another 10th tier spirit tool couldn't end up with both sides being completely unharmed. After a few clashes, it would indeed be fine, but after many, one side would definitely be damaged. And if the quality of both sides was almost the same, then both would be damaged. Thus, Ling Han's physique might be comparable to 10th tier rare gold, but it could still be wounded by a 10th tier spirit tool, even severed. Wu Gaoyuan's battle prowess was too powerful, and in a few slashes, Ling Han started to spill blood violently. Even 10th tier rare metal physique couldn't withstand it. "Ha ha ha, tough guy, why don't you talk tough again?" He laughed loudly. "This isn't tough talk, it's strength," Ling Han said indifferently, operating indestructible heaven's scroll, and the wounds immediately healed automatically. If these injuries weren't cut by a shattering void tier elite, then the diamond body could heal them on its own. Unfortunately, a shattering void tier elite's attack obviously included martial intent, which could obstruct the diamond body from self-recovery, and so the indestructible heaven's scroll had to be operated to expel Wu Gaoyuan's martial intent for the injuries to recover. At a shocking pace, he instantly recovered completely, his blood and chi as exuberant as if they could burn the skies. What? Seeing this scene, everyone was speechless. What the hell? What level of recovery ability was that? A formidable physique alone could be slowly refined if it couldn't be damaged, but such recovery ability on top of such a physique, then there would be no answer. TMPH, such recovery ability, can you constantly use it? Wu Gaoyuan sneered. He wouldn't believe that Ling Han could limitlessly employ such a terrifying recovery ability. It definitely wouldn't be long before it would no longer be in effect. He attacked crazily, trying to force Ling Han to his limit. Everyone nodded. Such shocking recovery ability couldn't possibly be constantly maintained, it definitely exhausted an extreme amount of energy. Moreover, there was no need to wait for such recovery ability to disappear. As long as the recovery speed couldn't keep up with the destructive power, Ling Han would still die. However, beyond everyone's expectations, Ling Han stood up again and again. No matter which way the wind blew, he was like boulder, remaining unmoved. Wu Gaoyuan refused to buy it, believing all along that Ling Han would reach the limit in the next move, but he was disappointed over and over again. Ling Han stood up, again, and again. His strength was clearly stronger, and not just by a little bit, but by an absolutely overwhelming amount. However, encountering this freak, he had no way to defeat him for good, and could only strike him down continuously, yet couldn't see the possibility of killing him. The 8 kings finally revealed an exhilarated look. They originally thought that the 5 sects would get them this time, and true to their personalities, they definitely would keep their word and not sortie any soldiers in the following 100 years. Although nothing could be done, keeping a promise was obviously greater than anything else. This was truly an unexpected rescue from a desperate situation. Although Ling Han definitely couldn't win, as long as he didn't lose, this match would be a draw, and the entire wager would also be a draw. They obviously wouldn't need to keep the promise of not moving any troops in 100 years. Even Ma Duo Bao nodded slightly. He knew that Ling Han was remarkable, but had never expected him to be this remarkable. In contrast, on the side of the 5 sects, each and every one of their faces was gloomy. They intentionally gave the impression of weakness before, luring Ma Duo Bao into agreeing to the wager. Seeing that it would soon succeed, who would have expected that such a freak would come charging out? 9 battles ending in a draw. Would Ma Duobao agree not to take the field himself? Damn it, this damned brat. The 5 sects all hated Ling Han. If this battle really ended up in a draw, Ling Han would be the 5 sects' mortal enemy. Moreover, this child's cultivation was only in the deity transformation tier, so what if he crossed into the shattering void tier? Would there be anyone in the world that could suppress him? Wu Gaoyuan was driven mad. He was conceited. A divine realm's genius obviously looked down on the people of the lower realm. This time, the 5 great divine sects paid a great price to send 5 shattering void tier elites down in order to turn the tides. But now, a mere deity transformation tier warrior stopped him. If this were to spread back to the divine realm, would he have any face to see people in the future? He brandished the treasured sword and kept slashing Ling Han, swearing to annihilate Ling Han into pieces. Futile. Ling Han wasn't an indestructible diamond body, so he would also be injured, but his rate of recovery made people speechless. Unless one had the ability to destroy Ling Han's vitals in one attack, Ling Han would never be defeated fighting on like this. Wu Gaoyuan already used all his strength. He had acquired the sword heart, but never reached the level of illumination, so when he attempted to destroy Ling Han's soul with sword heart, Ling Han wasn't weaker than him. He'd also reached sword heart, and would even soon reach great mastery. The two fought fiercely. 1 day passed, 2 days passed, and 3 days passed. Ling Han was injured countless times, but it couldn't be seen at all. The only change was the many sets of clothes that he swapped into. It couldn't be helped. The indestructible Heaven's Scroll couldn't recover his clothes, and obviously a new set of clothes could only be changed when the other was torn. Although there's no time limit, the fight can't go on endlessly. Ma Duobao spoke up. Enough, this match ends in a draw. How could it possibly be a draw? The 5 sects were obviously unwilling to admit it, and said one after another, Wu Gaoyuan clearly has the absolute advantage. Having the advantage is the same as winning? The Lunar King sneered. Then, Since Ling Han is only in the deity transformation tier, after being able to fight a shattering void tier opponent for 3 days, this king can say that Ling Han has won. Ma Duo Bao walked forward a few steps, and said, "This emperor says that this match is a draw, who has any objections?" "I have." A person from the 5 sects jumped out. He was at the shattering void tier, but only the 3rd layer. Ma Duo Bao took a glance at him, and waved his right hand. Endless killing intent intertwined, and that shattering void tier elite was swept by a ball of light and instantly split into pieces, blood dripping and shaking the mountains. The shattering void tier elite actually couldn't stand up again, and his presence dispersed rapidly. He died. In one attack, an elite at the 3rd layer of the shattering void tier was killed, and separated by such a far distance, it was practically taking the general's head from hundreds of thousands of people as if taking something out of his pocket, easy and pleasant. This was Purple Moon Empire's #1 expert strength. Ma Duo Bao didn't take another glance, and simply said indifferently, "Who else has objections?" No one uttered a sound on the side of the 5 sects in the moment. Even those strong as were Chifang and the 3 others didn't dare to resist Ma Duo Bao head-on. Shattering Void Tier 20 stars of battle prowess? Definitely. How could a human achieve Shattering Void Tier 20 stars of battle prowess? Even offsprings of divine beasts, descendants of saints, only a mere few can reach such heights. Damn it, if this were the divine realm, the sect could send anyone to kill him. Zhuo Chifang and the 3 others communicated in soft voices. They were judging whether the 5 of them together could stop Ma Duo Bao. Even if they could, who would block the 8 kings? Wu Gaoyuan, take the axe. An old man with lightning flashing across the surface of the body threw an axe at Zhuo Chifang fiercely. The mountain river axe. Not an imitation, but the true mountain river axe, with the realm power that created the axe's surface. Cutting down with this axe, would even 10th tier rare metal be directly cut in two? Chapter 832, Entering the Stage. Chapter 832, Entering the Stage. Mountain and river axe, created by the regulation powers of a realm, how astonishing would its destructive abilities be? Wu Gaoyuan took hold of the mountain and river axe, and immediately laughed loudly. This thing, in the immortal realm, could only be considered invincible in the shattering void tier, and definitely could not be proclaimed a god tool, but in this lower realm, it was definitely the strongest spirit tool, and there was no others that could match it. With this, how could he still survive? Ho ho, so shameless? Ma Duo Bao smirked coldly. He swept out a finger, and a deep mark immediately appeared between Ling Han and Wu Gaoyuan. A terrifying killing intent sword, and even for one of Wu Gaoyuan's might, he dared not cross over a single step. Your Majesty, what is the meaning of this? Could it be that you want to ruin our wager? The members of the 5 sects asked. They seemed to be polite, yet were in fact trapping Ma Duo Bao with their words. Ma Duo Bao said calmly, "Since you have taken out even the mountain and river axe, then I will no longer be reserved with you, either." He paused, and called out loudly, "Ling Han, hand that sword over to me." That sword? Realization instantly dawned on Ling Han. That was the Revere Life Sword, and it had been personally forged by Ma Duo Bao's hands. Without hesitation, he summoned the Revere Life Sword out of the Black Tower with a wave of his right hand, and threw it over to Ma Duo Bao. He had not planned on using this sword previously. In front of battle prowess of 18 stars of shattering void tier, even if the Revere Life Sword was completely revived, it was not of much use. Ma Duo Bao received the sword, and gave it a few light strokes. The patterns on the sword immediately lit up. Not only was it completely revived, it had also become much stronger. He chuckled, and threw the Revere Life Sword back over to Ling Han. So powerful. Ling Han gripped the Revere Life Sword, and a feeling of invincibility rose up in his heart. He felt that even if immortals descended, he would still be able to kill them. With another wave of the hand from Ma Duo Bao, the mark on the ground instantly vanished, and the killing intent was no longer present, either. You're reading on Novelful, thanks. Wu Gaoyuan gave a humph. Did Ling Han think that he would be able to stand against him just because he had a sword? His battle prowess was stronger than Ling Han's by who knew how many times, and now that the mountain and river axe was added into the equation, it was definitely not something difficult for him to cut Ling Han's body open. He once again charged out, slashing out at Ling Han. Ling Han waved his sword. Shua, the light of the sword gushed out, and killing intent boiled over. This strike was extremely frightening. Wu Gaoyuan did not have the powerful physique and recovery abilities that Ling Han had, so how could he possibly dare to take this strike head-on? He hurriedly brandished the mountain and river axe in a parry. Peng, a loud bang sounded, and killing intent overflowed. He actually failed to destroy Ling Han's attack. What? Everyone exclaimed in shock. That was the mountain and river axe, formed from the powers of an entire realm. Adding Wu Gaoyuan's own strength, he should have been able to slice apart Ling Han's sword light with a single blow, and it itself could not have been blocked, either. The gap was really much too big, after all. And yet, Wu Gaoyuan's counter had actually been blocked. How could this be possible? What kind of sword is this? It could actually match the mountain and river axe. Wu Gaoyuan has 18 stars of shattering void tier of battle prowess. Added with the mountain and river axe, his battle prowess should have directly spiked up to 20 stars. But Ling Han managed to block him with just a sword. This is too ridiculous. Only the 8 kings wore prideful expressions. This sword was the work of their boss, one that was so strong that he had surpassed common sense. I don't believe it. Wu Gaoyuan's whole head of black hair rose on ends. He gritted his teeth. He was a proud prodigy of the immortal realm, and was a whole 2 tiers superior to Ling Han. Furthermore, he was wielding a powerful weapon like the mountain and river axe. And yet, he couldn't even manage to deal with a mere deity transformation tier cultivator. Ling Han smiled faintly. Actually, the Revere Life Sword had activated on its own, and his waving it around was merely for show. In truth, it should be said that it was the Revere Life Sword that was ordering him around, and not he that was using the Revere Life Sword. After Ma Duo Bao had done some tricks, this sword had not only activated, but had also become 10 times stronger than before. Just let the fight proceed, then. Anyways, he was merely doing the action, but not exerting any real energy, so no matter how long the battle took, it would be fine. TSK, 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 how lively. You don't mind if we join too, right? Another group of people walked out from the foot of the mountain, and every one of them looked incredibly strange. It was not that they had strange appearances, but that the aura they were exuding was very odd. Every one of them felt as if they had climbed out of a grave, eerie and frightening. This was not a misconception, because they were members of the 1,000 Corpse sect. The 9th Underworld King, Corpse Boss, Corpse 2, as well as Rong Huanxian. Why was this guy together with the 1,000 Corpse sect? Both Ling Han and Wu Gaoyuan stopped. There would be no meaning even if they continued their battle. Ma Duo Bao's eyes swept over them. He asked, so the 1,000 Corpse sect is in a rush to die as well? The 1,000 Corpse sect's appearance at this point. Could it be that they had just been walking around, and somehow gotten lost? It was obviously impossible. They had purposely come here. Just think, it was not possible that they had merely come to watch the excitement. The 1,000 Corpse sect had allied with the 5 sects. The 9th Underworld King laughed loudly, and asked, Your Majesty, do you really think that you are unmatched in this world? Indeed. Ma Duo Bao nodded honestly and without reservation. I am number 1 in this world, and I shall kill whomever does not acknowledge this fact. So, do you acknowledge it or not? This boast was very big, but the 9th Underworld King could find no way to refute it. In terms of power, he would only be in the ranks of the Sword King and Beast Snake King. He could not even match the 8 kings, what more actually exchange blows with Ma Duo Bao. But how could he allow his party's morale to weaken at this moment? I really do not acknowledge the fact, the 9th Underworld King smirked coldly. He stretched out a hand to summon something, and a copper coffin suddenly slid over. The 3 Lives Corpse Casket. Peng, the casket slid opened, and a corpse soldier jumped out. Shockingly, its face had a whole bunch of eyes, and upon counting, there were actually as many as 18 of them. An 18-eyed corpse king. How was that possible? The 1,000 Corpse sect had schemed for several thousand years, and only just managed to produce a 15-eyed corpse king. Yet now, an 18-eyed corpse king actually appeared. Ling Han could not help but turn to look at Rong Huanxian. This was definitely linked to the 3 lives corpse casket. Could it be that Rong Huanxian had come to some form of agreement with the 1,000 Corpse sect, and had thus returned the 3 lives corpse casket to them? With all 3 treasures assembled, some kind of metamorphosis had been stimulated. You plan to stop me with just that? Ma Duo Bao could not help but laugh loudly, his small eyes squinting. He appeared to be completely harmless, but a terrifying killing intent was exuded from his whole body, causing everyone to feel their blood running cold. With battle prowess of 20 stars of shattering void tier, he was definitely the strongest person in this world, so who could remain fearless in front of him? Have you forgotten us, Your Majesty? The elites of the 5 sects all stepped out as well. They had a total of 5 ultimate elites with 18 stars of shattering void tier of battle prowess, and furthermore had a powerful, deadly weapon like the mountain and river axe as well. You all? Ma Duo Bao began to show his domineering side, and said coldly, a flock of lambs. No matter how many there are, how could they be a match for a lion? Hearing him describe them as lambs, whether it was the 5 sects of the 1,000 Corpse sect, everyone looked indignant. Indeed, they did not have battle prowess of 20 stars of shattering void tier, but with so many shattering void tier elites, how could it be that they would not be able to kill him by ganging up on him? Since that is the case, 9th Underworld King, just do as what we have previously agreed on. Let's work together, an antique of the 5 sects said. All right, the 9th Underworld King agreed decisively, and nodded at Rong Huanxian. The latter summoned out a copper coffin as well, and another 18-eyed corpse king jumped out. 3 lives corpse casket consisted of 3 caskets, and now, one was in the hands of the 9th Underworld King, while the other 2 were still with Rong Huanxuan. Thankfully, they only had 2 18-eyed corpse kings, but their battle prowess was still very frightening. 7 great elites with battle prowess of 18 stars of shattering void tier had joined forces against Ma Duo Bao. Chapter 833, The Final Battle. Chapter 833, The Final Battle. Ma Duo Bao did not take them seriously at all, and said, "Come at me, all of you. Without you saying so, that was our intention." Zhuo Qifang, Wu Gaoyuan, and the other 3 prodigies of the immortal realm, as well as 2 18-eyed corpse kings, the terror this group brought would make anyone shiver. Ho ho, battle prowess of 20 stars of shattering void tier. Even in the immortal realm, this is incredibly rare. I would really like to take a look at it. Too bad. So what if you have 20 stars of battle prowess? There is too big a gap in the immortal level. The gap between 10 stars and 20 stars of shattering void tier isn't even very big, so there is absolutely no reason to charge up to this limit. From this day on, the Purple Moon Empire will no longer exist. Zhuo Qifang and the others all spoke with cold smirks, their words filled with disdain. Yet Ling Han shook his head. It was precisely because there was too big a gulf between each tier on the immortal level that there was a need to perfect cultivation on every cultivation level below that. Otherwise, on what basis would those so-called geniuses with 1 star or 2 stars be stronger than others? Zhuo Qifang and the others spoke this way merely because they were not able to touch the high level of 20 stars. Any person sent down from the 5 sects of the immortal realm, if they were not suppressed by the regulation powers of the realm, would be able to sweep aside all opposition in the lower realm, but the 5 sects themselves might not be any kind of top-tier party in the immortal realm. Thus, the younger generation that they had nurtured might not have perfected their cultivation on every cultivation level. However, being able to reach 18 stars on shattering void tier was very extraordinary by itself. At least, in the lower realm, who knew how many millennia had passed for 2 such freaks like Ma Duo Bao and Helian Tianyun to appear. Ma Duo Bao carelessly raised a hand, and delivered an attack towards the 7 great elites. Hey! The 5 great prodigies all struck their own blows. Wu Gaoyuan even brandished the mountain and river axe. As the axe swept past, even space itself was torn open. The 2 18-eyed corpse kings were unafraid of Ma Duo Bao's might, and directly charged towards him. Peng! Peng! The 2 great corpse kings were instantly sent flying back, but with this collision, Ma Bao's attack had been dissipated considerably, and Zhuo Qifang and the others managed to easily parry it. You're reading on novel full thanks. From this, it was clear how powerful Ma Bao was. Just a careless strike, yet it could only be matched with the combined effort of 7 great elites with 18 stars of shattering void tier of battle prowess. Ping, ping, pang, pang. They were soon embroiled in a fierce battle. Both sides definitely had ultimate moves that they had not yet used. They battled all the way from the foot of the mountain to the peak, and then into the skies. Whole swathes of stars fell. It was as if it was the end of the world. Thankfully, the stars in the skies had also been formed by the powers of the world, and could be replenished endlessly. If not, going by how they were fighting, no matter how many stars there were in the skies, they would not survive the punishment the fighters were inflicting on them. Hehe, have you washed your necks clean? The heavenly astral king asked with a smirk. Though the 8 kings could not be considered second-tier elites as they were now, with the appearance of battle prowess of 18 stars of shattering void tier, 15 stars of battle prowess would still rank them on the 3rd tier. Although there were only 8 of them, they had enough confidence that they would be able to crush the over 100 shattering void tier elites from the 5 sects. What shameless boasting! A few brown-haired antiques began to ignite their vitality. Hong, a terrifying power erupted from their bodies, and they had instantly raised their battle prowess to 14 stars. The 5 sects indeed had deep roots. Ordinarily, once they entered the shattering void tier, the elites of the 5 sects would choose to seal themselves away, and wait until the reckoning was complete, then enter into the immortal realm and continue their cultivation. This would save effort, and lead to better results. However, there were also a few that could first choose not to seal themselves off, but rather continue cultivation. They would only leave themselves a few dozen years of time, then use the time liquid. They were called the Protector Technique Kings. If a major issue that would threaten the survival of the 5 sects appeared, though, it was not very likely they would unseal themselves and step out to eliminate the danger. But, because they themselves did not have many years left, every time they battled, they had to burn their vitality. This actually was expending their lifespan as a price, and would further shorten their already limited lifespans. Even if they entered into the immortal realm in future, they might not have enough time to advance into the immortal level. This was something that required considerable awareness and courage. Thus, the Protector Technique Kings were the most respected. Even Zhuo Qifang and the other prodigies of the immortal realm were very polite and incredibly respectful towards them. There was a total of 5 Protector Technique Kings, and 4 amongst them had reached 14 stars of shattering void tier of battle prowess, whereas the last had achieved 15 stars of shattering void tier. With the addition of the 5 of them, the might of the 5 sects naturally experienced a great increase. Charred. Though the Lunar King was a woman, her temper was the most violent, and she was the first to charge out an attack. 8 lunar techniques. From the very beginning, she was unleashing powerful moves. Her 2 dainty hands transformed into earth-shattering giant palms that delivered successive palm strikes downwards. The other 7 kings were naturally not just going to sit by and watch. They, too, charged out respectively. On the other side, Ling Han seemed to have become completely free. He rubbed his chin, and mumbled to himself, "Is there still a need for me to move?" The Revere Life Sword was no longer glowing. In actual truth, it was Ma Bao who was controlling it from a distance just now. Now that Ma Bao himself was fighting against powerful enemies, he naturally would not have the leisure to manipulate the Revere Life Sword anymore. Though Ling Han's defenses were top tier, and there might not be any other that could match him, his destructive abilities, in the face of shattering void tier elites, were completely negligible. Whether he moved or otherwise, it did not seem like it would cause any changes. "Ling Han, I'll be your opponent." Shu Xiuran, wielding the absolute saber, ran out. Ling Han swatted a hand at him, and said, "I can't bother to fight with you, you are too weak now." Shu Xiuran was completely enraged, trembling. He was still a well-known figure of the younger generation in this whole world. Even in the immortal realm, he could still be considered a genius as he had grasped Saberheart, though he wouldn't be as rare as he was here. "You are underestimating me too much. What if I join in, then?" "Me too. And I." Dong Linger, the small sword emperor, and the son of lightning all stepped out as well, their eyes cold and harsh. Ling Han shook the Revere life sword, and said, "Fine, then I'll send you all down to hell so that you can atone for the innocent blood your predecessors have spilled. They are all ants, contributing what they have for the sake of our immortal realm. Should that not be their responsibility?" the son of lightning said, a twisted smile curling his lips. He had already summoned out the replica of the mountain and river axe. There was a sliver of the realm powers condensed inside, so its might was not to be underestimated. Ling Han's expression grew harsh, and he raised his sword level. Pointing at the son of lightning, he said, "Just for these words, you deserve to die. You would have to be able to kill me first." The son of lightning laughed loudly. Brandishing the mountain and river axe, he charged out in attack. This treasure had already been activated, and was exuding a terrifying might. But the Revere life sword showed absolutely no reaction. Could it be that it had expended too much energy in the battle of ultimate brilliance just now? This was not something impossible. The mountain and river axe could be proclaimed the strongest spirit tool in this whole realm, and adding Wu Gaoyuan's own power, how terrifying was that? Yet he was still blocked by the Revere life sword. Though Ma Duo Bao had been manipulating it, there would definitely have been a great expense of energy, so it was logical that it could not unleash its powers now. Ha 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 ha. When Shu Xiuran saw this, he could not help but laugh loudly. "If this sword of yours is unable to activate, how could it be that you will be able to match us?" He activated the absolute saber as well, and slashed out at Ling Han. Once these two spirit tools were activated, they would equal shattering void tier battle prowess, and furthermore, that would be 10 stars at least, which was even stronger than the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. This had far exceeded Ling Han's own battle prowess. Chapter 834, Scaring Away the Third Killing Formation. Chapter 834, Scaring Away the Third Killing Formation. Ling Han used the Thunderclap Ninth Heaven, and added with the Demon Fairy Steps, his body became incredibly agile. He had drawn Zhu Xian Rabbit, and the gold-seeking rat into the Black Tower so that they wouldn't be unexpectedly wounded in the battle royal, because he could not divert his attention to look after them as well. There was no need for him to worry about the 1,000 veteran soldiers. They had placed themselves in a battle formation, and with incomparably frightening battle prowess, charged into the group battle the 8 kings were involved in to fight alongside their respective bosses. Although the absolute saber and mountain and river axe were powerful, they were still merely 2 spirit tools. Furthermore, they did not have tool spirits. This meant that they could only deliver frighteningly mighty attacks, but were not capable of automatically locking down onto their targets, and thus required manual control. No matter how monstrously talented Shu Xiuran and the Son of Lightning were, their cultivation level was still a great disadvantage. Firstly, they would have to be able to grasp Ling Han's movements to aim their attacks. As long as they could do this, with the speed of the attacks delivered from these 2 spirit tools, Ling Han would not be able to dodge. But the problem was, they would have to grasp Ling Han's movements first. How fast was Ling Han's speed now? It was a whole blur to their eyes. For every 10 attacks they shot out, at least 9 would miss. If they faced any other person, it would be fine. With the might of these 2 spirit tools, suffering even a single attack, even if he did not die, he would be heavily injured. But it was Ling Han now. His physique was as tough as level 10 precious metal, so what would being hit with a single attack do? It did not manage to give him an itch. What more pain? If he was slashed 100 over times, perhaps he would only have a very shallow wound. There was nothing that could be done. The toughness of his physique allowed him to act as recklessly as he liked. "Nyo will come and help you." Nyo charged out as well. Her physique was far inferior to Ling Han's, but in terms of speed, she was superior. As she scrambled up and down, her tiny fists and claws were filled with destructive ability, and posed an incredible threat to Shu Xiuran and his group. On all 3 sides, it was a battle royal. Whichever battle it was, they were on the level of shattering void tier. Thus, even heaven tier cultivators were not qualified to join in on this kind of battle, and could only watch from afar unless they, too, could set up their own formation. But the battle between Ma Duo Bao and Wu Gaoyuan was the real decisive battle. Whoever won this battle, It would doubtlessly result in a massacre of the other side. Therefore, though the other two groups were battling furiously, they all split out a portion of their attention to focus on the fierce battle taking place in the highest spot. Would it be Ma Duo Bao who emerged victorious over all his contenders, or would he be swallowed by the pack of wolves? In the second group, the Beast Snake King shouted loudly, "Azura Demon Emperor, are you not going to reveal yourself?" The Azura Demon Emperor. Ling Han's heart trembled. That was an existence with 15 stars of shattering void tier of battle prowess, and could very likely tip the balance of victory in the second group to one side. You really have a dog's nose. I've already hidden so far away, yet you could still sniff me out. The Azura Demon Emperor appeared. He was still possessing the body of a sturdy man, and there was black demonic chi twined all over his body. Merely one look, and one could tell that he was far different from an ordinary person. The other one too. How long do you want to continue watching the show? The Sword King called out as well, shooting out a flash of sword chi to a distant spot. Hee. A cloaked person shot out from that spot. The third killing formation. A person who could set up formation techniques by nature. From birth, he was the strongest existence in the world, and could kill even shattering void tier elites. Ling Han's eyes swept over him, and he could not help but secretly feel shocked. He had seen this person once before, but at the time, the latter gave him a feeling of weakness. Though he was very powerful, he himself was extremely weak and feeble. But now, this feeling was gone. Previously, he had helped out the 1,000 Corpse sect, and the payment he had received was probably related to this, compensating for a weakness of his. How powerful would this kind of third killing formation be? The 9 great killing formations could all kill shattering void tier elites. To be specific, Ling Han had only seen the 4th killing formation. Moreover, it was not naturally formed, but a handicapped formation that the 1,000 Corpse sect had laid out, and had been easily broken by Feng Po Yun. But how strong would a third killing formation that had compensated for its disadvantage be? Could he kill a shattering void tier with 10 stars of battle prowess, or 15 stars? I have been asked a favor. I will only act once, kill one person, and leave, the third killing formation said, his eyes focused on the 8 kings. He said he would only kill one person, and from the looks of it, the person he wanted to kill was one of the 8 kings. With the inclusion of the Azura Demon Emperor, the 8 kings were actually no longer at the advantage in the battle. The third killing formation really could kill one of them. Then, with this as an opening, the remaining 7 kings would definitely retreat in defeat little by little. They would either retreat, or die in battle here. It was difficult for a shattering void tier elite to die, but it did not mean that they were not killable. Ling Han wanted to move to block the third killing formation. Though his battle prowess was not strong, his defenses were much too terrifying, and it would be a perfect thing for him to use that to cause a disruption in enemy plans. You had best stay here obediently. Xu Xiuran smirked coldly. Working together with the Son of Lightning, they stopped Ling Han from interfering. The cooperation of the Absolute Saber and the Mountain and River Axe, if even that could not detain Ling Han, then something would be wrong. Humph. Ma Duo Bao's cold humph was heard from the skies. For the sake of, I will spare your life, scram. The third killing formation could not help but sneer. What a big boast, to actually dare tell him to scram. He raised his head to look upwards. Initially, his expression was one of disapproval, but immediately, his expression changed drastically. Though the masses could not see his expression, they could clearly see his entire body was trembling. You are, he exclaimed in shock as if he had experienced a scare. His tone was filled with indescribable terror. Are you getting lost or not? Ma Duo Bao rebuked harshly. Yes. The third killing formation did not even dare say another word. He actually just turned around and left, and in an instant, he had disappeared without a trace. That was the third killing formation that could kill even shattering void tier, something formed by nature. How could it be that he would be scared off by just a single word? Could it be that Ma Duo Bao had another identity? The third killing formation had recognized him, then had been scared off and fled. Humph, you still dare to lose focus when you are exchanging blows with us. Wu Gaoyuan and his group smirked coldly, and they all made their moves. Hong. Instantly, Ma Duo Bao was drowned in endless light. In this kind of highly intense battle, how could he split his attention? Wu Gaoyuan and his group all smiled. Though the third killing formation had been scared off, if they could kill Ma Duo Bao, or at least inflict a serious injury on him, it would be absolutely worth it. As the brilliance dissipated, Ma Duo Bao stood there proudly, without even a scratch. If one had to insist, then there were a few places on his imperial robes that had been torn, which proved that he had indeed suffered the barrage of attacks just now. However, his body had not been wounded. What? Wu Gaoyuan and the others exclaimed in shock. What was going on here? They all had battle prowess of 18 stars of shattering void tier. If their attack landed solidly, so what if the other had battle prowess of 20 stars of shattering void tier? He would still be severely wounded, or even killed directly. Your physique, Zhuo Qifeng came to realize. It has reached the toughness of level 10 precious metal. Pu. Everyone choked in astonishment. Previously, that terrifying physique of Ling Han's had already given them a psychological fear. Furthermore, Ling Han only had a monstrous physique, whereas his battle prowess was completely negligible. But what about now? Ma Duo Bao's battle prowess was already on top of everyone here, and adding this kind of powerful defense to the mix, how were they supposed to continue fighting? Wu Gaoyuan and his group all swallowed with difficulty. This was the first time that they felt that they had completely lost control of the situation in this war. This Ma Duo Bao could completely match the alternative dragon from years ago. His battle prowess was invincible, and his defenses were unbreakable. Even if immortals descended, what could they do against him? Thankfully, shattering void tier elites still had a limited lifespan. Time was the strongest weapon. I couldn't kill you, but I could trap you in the prison of this realm until your death. Ma Duo Bao smiled calmly, and countered, without this bit of ability, what use is there to speak of splitting open the skies? Sure, his aura was spiking crazily, killing intent surging forth. Even Wu Gaoyuan and the others felt a chill run down their backs, goosebumps covering their whole bodies. They felt that he could kill them just by raising his hand. Chapter 835 First Killing Formation. Chapter 835 First Killing Formation. Humans, how could they be so powerful until such an extent? 18 stars of shattering void tier, this was practically already the ultimate battle prowess of this tier, and there were actually as many as 7 people who had attained it. By joining forces, they could definitely rival someone with 20 stars of shattering void tier, so why did they still feel trepidation? Could it be that Ma Duo Bao's battle prowess surpassed that of 20 stars? Impossible. Wu Gaoyuan and others shook their heads. They absolutely could not believe that one could surpass the battle prowess limit of 20 stars. Even the descendants of divine beasts and sages could rarely achieve the battle prowess of 20 stars of shattering void tier, let alone surpass it. We must get rid of him today. Otherwise, given the boost of power of the nation, he will only become stronger. Zhuo Qifeng said. Attack! Xiao Miaoyan screamed, brandishing a long blood-red sword. She then made a cut at her eyebrows, her forehead broke open, and a drop of crimson blood rushed forth, as thick and viscous as if it had crystallized. The moment this drop of blood appeared, heaven and earth were moved, black clouds began to roll, with blazing white lighting looming in the background. This drop of blood was just too powerful. It was strong to the point of almost exceeding the limit of this realm, which resulted in the reaction of heaven and earth. Immortal blood. Ma Duo Bao was finally showing a cautious expression. The immortals really didn't just send 5 people down, but also sent personal artifact. Although a drop of blood couldn't represent the immortals at all, could one imagine the power of immortals' blood in this lower realm? Xiao Miaoyan began mumbling something. It was unknown what she was mumbling about. At this moment, this drop of immortal's blood was transformed into a sudden rain that splashed on her long sword. Suddenly, this sword exuded an endless brilliance. Its power could even suppress that of the mountain and river axe. Just a single drop of Immortal's blood could boost the sword's power to an extent where it could at least rival the real mountain and river axe. It was really too terrifying. It was the same for Zhuo Qifeng and the others. They each took out a drop of Immortal's blood and smeared it on their own spirit tools. In an instant, their auras became more terrifying by several times, just as if they had taken on the body of Immortals. Now, the battle prowess of these 5 people would have reached 20 stars of shattering void tier. Each one of them wouldn't be any inferior to Ma Jiuobao. Die. The 5 people joined forces, with each of them launching powerful attacks. The 5 spirit tools unleashed their power that surged upwards, causing a great number of stars to fall. How could this be blocked? With the power of the 5 being 20 stars of shattering void tier, even a physique of level 10 precious metal would still be slashed apart. Could Ma Jiuobao also have the terrifying healing ability like Ling Han? Everything would end. Ma Jiuobao had a solemn expression. Strong as he might be, he didn't dare to look lightly upon the battle prowess of 20 stars of shattering void tier, not to mention when his opponents were as many as 5. He held out his finger, and gently tapped chest, saying, "Release, Wang." In an instant, endless killing intent began circulating. While his body was emitting white light, one could clearly see that his exposed skin was covered with glowing patterns, ancient, thick, and imposing. What was even more astonishing was the killing intent. The sight of these patterns could make a person's heart feel fear and flesh shiver. People with lower cultivation level would immediately be blinded at first sight. Martial intent. No, these were patterns of a formation. Ling Han had seen Yin Hong brand formation patterns on her own body. This was very practical. Using her own body as a formation, the power of the patterns could be activated anytime for attack or defense. Yet, these formation patterns on Ma Jiuobao, it seemed as if he was born with them, so much so that Ling Han doubted that anyone could reproduce these patterns. This was because they were extremely uncomfortable to the eyes just by looking at them, and this was when he had activated the Eye of Truth and was circulating Sword Heart at the same time. Would ordinary shattering void tier cultivators dare to stare at it? Yet, if one didn't even dare to look at it, how could one reproduce these patterns? Being so complex, how could they be mastered if one had not studied them meticulously for decades, or even centuries? Born with these patterns? Damn, then he would be the same as the 3rd killing formation. It was no wonder that he had shown mercy to the 3rd killing formation previously, and his manner of speaking was odd. It was no wonder that the 3rd killing formation was so emotionally moved. It was because they were similar and recognized each other. But the 3rd killing formation was actually scared off by a single word from Ma Jiuobao. What did this mean? The world's 1st killing formation. The 5 people, including Zhuo Qifeng, all halted their attacks simultaneously, while their faces revealed expressions of horror. Ma Jiuobao was unexpectedly a natural formation in human form, and the 1st killing formation at that. Legend had it that the 1st killing formation could slaughter immortals. How could the group of 5, including Zhuo Qifeng, not be afraid? They had yet to become immortals. Ling Han finally understood. It was no wonder that when Ma Jiuobao had gotten on top of the martial stone, he had left behind number 1 as his name. This was not just his pride, but also his real name. The world's 1st killing formation. Ma Jiuobao dealt out a blow, and Hong, endless killing intent circulated, and the entire realm became shrouded. Everywhere the white light swept past, space was forcefully torn open, and endless energy flowed through in disorder. Its impact was incomparably terrifying. This was his true strength, the world's 1st killing formation that could slaughter immortals. The group of 5, including Zhuo Qifeng, were forced to stand together into a corner. They joined forces to confront the attack. So what if the strongest spirit tools in the world joined forces? They were still suppressed. They could barely defend themselves. Pu, blood was splashing out from their bodies, and they became heavily injured in an instant. This made the 5 great sects and 1,000 corpse sect lose hope. The world's 1st killing formation, it would kill whatever stood in its path, be it gods or Buddha. In this small realm, it was absolutely invincible. Otherwise, would it be crowned as the number 1? Hong. At this moment, something weird happened. Coming out from the crevice in space Ma Duo bow had torn open was the bow of a ship. Since the crevice in space was not very big, only a tiny bit of the bow of the ship came out. However, this tiny bit was enough to make everyone weak in the knees, causing them to neatly fall from the sky. No one was an exception. It was the same for the group of 5 including Zhu Qifang, the 18-eyed corpse kings, and even Ma Duo Bao. Peng, 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 more than 100 shattering void tear cultivators had fallen from the sky like dumplings, and every one of them had fallen down pitifully. They were in an incomparably miserable state. This scene was actually a bit funny since no one expected shattering void tear cultivators could also become like this, but no one was able to laugh at this moment. Instead, their expressions revealed unsurpassed horror. Everyone knew that the void was the most dangerous place in the world. If one was to land within it, even the physique of level 10 precious metal would be quickly torn into pieces. Yet, it was indeed too difficult to open up the void. This could only be done by shattering void tear cultivators, thereby opening up a channel to enter into the immortal realm. Yet, shattering the void was an absolutely dangerous matter. One could easily fall to death. Even if there weren't any ambush from the great formation put up by the 5 great sects, the maximum number of cultivators of the shattering void tier who could successfully shatter the void was only half. But an entire ship was coming out through the void. This was like a myth. What materials could resist the destructive power of the void? In that moment, everyone had lost any intention of fighting. They were only left with feelings of shock and puzzlement. This ship, what did it represent? Hong, 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 the bow of the ship gently struck the crevice in space. It obviously didn't seem heavy, but after each impact, the heavens were shaken. Even cultivators of the shattering void tier couldn't help but vomit blood as this impact seemed to have directly hit their hearts. Black Tower vibrated gently inside him. Ling Han remained nonchalant as if nothing happened, so did Hu Niu. This little girl was similarly very strange. Chapter 836, The Huge Ship That Came Out the Void. Chapter 836, The Huge Ship That Came Out the Void. Hong. Finally, after the impact from striking at the crevice more than a dozen times, the bow of the ship appeared completely. The entire hull of the ship followed suit, sliding through the opening due to the pull of gravity, and came crashing down to the ground. Peng, the bow of the ship hit a mountain peak, and the latter easily collapsed. The great protective formation was practically useless. That shield of light barrier immediately crumbled into innumerable fragments upon impact, scattered into an infinite distance. The lofty mountain collapsed as if it were made of sand and stones, which would completely disintegrate with just a single touch. Once the bow hit the ground, the entire ship swerved downwards loudly, and landed on the ground with a deafening bang. The ship lay flat on the ground, appearing as if it was sailing. The ship was extremely long and tall. Its length was nearly 1 kilometer, while its height was more than 170 meters. From a distance, it looked like a small mountain. The ship's entire hull was dark green in color, and mainly made of wood, yet it was impossible to ascertain which tree species the wood belonged to. A ship made of wood was capable of resisting the powerful pressure and tearing force of the void. How could this be acceptable? It was unknown how many years the ship had existed within the void. The flag placed at the bow of the ship was completely destroyed, leaving only the bare flagpole. Aside from that, there were several holes in the ship's hull, which appeared to be caused by external bombardment. If the ship had been bombarded within the void, then that would be acceptable. However, if the ship had already been bombarded before entering the void, then that would indeed be extremely scary. Whose strength was so powerful to have caused such damage to the ship that even the void couldn't do anything to, and what kind of destructive power could have achieved this? The latter possibility was more likely. Given that the void could blast holes in the hull of the ship, how could it just blast a few holes? It would have certainly destroyed the entire ship. The big ship lay there quietly. Although it caused a stir when it appeared, it was now extremely quiet. The hull was originally shining, but its luster now appeared somewhat dim. It looked ordinary. Those who didn't know the truth would have thought that a terrible tsunami had brought this ship here from the sea. The pressure had weakened a lot, although it still made people somewhat uncomfortable, There was no longer that agonizing feeling that made people vomit blood. For a moment, everyone's eyes were burning. Since this ship could pass through the void without being destroyed, it was precisely a treasure in and of itself. If the ship could be dismantled and its materials used for refining, there was no knowing how many high-grade spirit tools could be made from it. Moreover, with the hull already being so precious, if there was something inside it, then what kind of treasure would that be? What use was there to continue fighting? Everyone rushed towards the big ship. They wanted to leap onto the deck and enter the ship through the cabin doors, but soon discovered that they simply couldn't make it onto the deck. It was merely a height of 170 meters or so, yet it was like an insurmountable mountain. No matter how high they jumped or flew, they were always lacking a little bit. They had no way of landing on the top of the ship. The same was true for shattering void tier cultivators. This made them even more certain that this was truly a treasure that would transcend everything. Even in the immortal realm, it would be something that everyone would fight tooth and nail for. If the deck couldn't be reached, then weren't there some holes in the ship's hull? Someone gave it a try, and proceeded to enter smoothly. This made others excited, and they quickly followed suit. Should there be any godly artifact inside the ship, it might immediately turn the tide of the battle. Your Majesty. The 8 kings simultaneously looked at Ma Duo Bao. Let's go in to take a look. Ma Duo Bao nodded. He tried to block the 5 great sects and 1,000 corpse sect from entering, but his power immediately disappeared as soon as he approached the big ship. Now, everyone's battle prowess was no longer important. The important point was that this ship could change everything. Tanned brother, what about you? Ma Duo Bao turned around to ask Ling Han. I will go in by myself. Ling Han nodded. Good. Mad Duo Bao left the 1,000 elite troops behind. Leading the 8 kings, he entered through one of the holes in the ship's hull. Ling Han brought out Zhu Xian rabbit, and gold-seeking rat from the Black Tower, and recounted to them what had happened earlier. Treasure, the world's biggest treasure. Rabbit became round-eyed with amazement. Brat, Lord Rabbit can confirm that this is a treasure even in the immortal realm. You must obtain it. The gold-seeking rat was even more excited, directly throwing itself there. It then hung from the ship's hull and nibbled at it with great effort. As it turned out, it had fixed its attention onto a rivet on the hull, and was exerting all its effort to pull it out. However, when its mouth latched onto the big ship, it was completely unable to use its ability. Naturally, it became so anxious that it screamed, making loud z, z, z sounds. The delicious food was in front of you, but you couldn't eat it. This made it anxious to the extreme. Ling Han had never seen the gold-seeking rat so agitated. Even if it was given the level 10 precious metal, it would not have been so eager. It seemed that the value of the ship itself had exceeded that of level 10 precious metal. This made sense. Otherwise, how could it have resisted the pressure of the void? Come, we shall go in to take a look. Ling Han took the lead. Hu Niu tilted her head to one side, while her hand grabbed onto Ling Han's clothes, allowing him to bring her in with him. She suddenly said, Weird, Niu seems to have seen this big ship. Is that so? Ling Han's heart was moved. Think carefully, where and when did you see it? Niu can't remember. Hu Niu answered in disappointment. Ling Han smiled, patted her little head, and said, It's all right. Once inside, you will see more things, which perhaps may help you remember. The origins of Hu Niu were unusual, and she was incomparably formidable and terrifying. To say that she might be connected to this mysterious ship was not an impossibility. They chose a hole in the ship, through which they entered the lowest floor thereof. It was very dark inside, so dark that even they could not see clearly. This was extremely extraordinary. One had to know that they could still see things even in a darker environment with their eyesight, unless there was some kind of restriction there. Only that would affect their eyesight. Ling Han raised his hand, transforming his origin power into fire attribute. A blazing flame was burning on his palm, yet despite it, the light could not reach very far. It was as if there was an invisible force that would suppress and prevent the spreading of light. Fortunately, they could at least see things within a range of over 3 meters. They were in a cabin, but found it to be completely empty. Presumably, The opening of the hole was caused by the rushing force of the void, which had also destroyed everything inside. This was easy to understand. The outer defense had to be the strongest, while the inside would be much more fragile, just like with the Great Mountain Protection Formation. Opening the hatch, they appeared in a very long walkway outside, with cabins on both sides. One by one, they pushed open the door to each cabin, only to find that all of them were empty, just as if they had been looted by robbers. They walked for a while, and found that they had reached the end of the walkway, but there wasn't any staircase to the upper floor. Hence, they turned around and walked back. Anyway, the hull was only a kilometer long, and it would not waste much time even if they walked back and forth for a few hundred times. But when they were halfway there, unexpectedly, they saw 5 women coming towards them. They were by no means people from the 5 great sects, Thousand Corpse Sect, or Purple Moon Empire. They were each holding onto a spear tightly in their hands, clad in a battle gear made of silver metal, which sparkled with a bright silvery radiance. Could they be crew members? Yikes, they weren't dead yet. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,